We'll go to Delegate Ruth, which is House Bill 9. The second to last bill will be Sample Hughes's bill, House Bill 71. And then the final bill of the afternoon will be Delegate Charkoudian's bill, House Bill 70, which we are also hearing jointly with another committee. Appropriations. Okay. So is Delegate Lewis with us? Come on up. Oh, okay. I was looking for Robin. You'll do, though.
You can settle with me, hopefully. Mr. Chair, can I bring up my panel?
Absolutely, please do.
Get it. Yeah. You sure? Just bring that up. Working out. Thank you. All right. To Chair Barve, Vice Chair Stein, and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee, today I'm here to present testimony in strong support of House Bill 12, the Equitable and Inclusive Transit-Oriented Development Enhancement Act. This bill will advance growth and development in the areas around our state's transit hubs so that we can better leverage our mass transit sites. This TOD initiative will ensure that we better connect Marylanders to more communities and opportunities. HB 12 will help the state to better utilize its resources and current transportation assets, supporting transit-oriented development through planning and other initiatives to move people off of our cars and off of our highways and byways and leverage the transit access and assets that we already have. In 2008, Maryland created the Transit-Oriented Development Designation process. However, since then, we have failed to provide many incentives required to fully fund and realize TOD across Maryland. Without further action, Maryland will miss crucial opportunities and fall short of its transit goals, and many Marylanders will be left behind as a result. This bill is a reintroduction from last year. You all did the yeoman's work of the Climate Solutions Act, and this kind of fell to the back burner. So we introduced this early to make sure, hopefully that's not the case this year. So thank you guys, and I'll hand it over to my panel.
Okay, just very quickly, in this committee, we give 4 minutes to elected office holders and 2 minutes to everyone else. And so who would like to go next? Mr. Executive, Madam Executive. Okay, and by the way, don't touch the buttons, please.
Okay, I apologize. I apologize. That's probably why you have to give those electeds more time, right? We mess up things like that. So, good afternoon. I want to thank Chairman Barve and Vice Chair Stein and the House Environment and Transportation Committee for considering House Bill 12 and allowing me to speak today in support of its passage. In 2021, I set a new economic vision for Prince George's County. It is a vision focused on growing jobs in our commercial tax base while also securing workforce housing. Along with these goals, we want to provide greater access to amenities that Prince Georgians have waited on for decades. When we unveiled our economic development platform in 2021, we were excited to share how that vision incorporated place-based economic development. The Blue Line Corridor is the anchor initiative of our vision for transit-oriented economic growth, an opportunity to create new destinations for our residents, our region, and beyond. This project would allow our county and state to take advantage of an underutilized transit corridor, creating opportunities for Marylanders to live, work, and play, all while growing our local economy. Our intention is to be the economic engine of the state and the region as well. We are fully invested in establishing a world-class sports, entertainment, and cultural destination that draws people from all over. Last week, the Board of Public Works approved our Memorandum of Understanding with the Maryland Stadium Authority, which documents our mutual agreement to spend up to $400 million in bonds on site acquisition, planning, design, and construction of sports and entertainment projects along the Blue Line Corridor in Prince George's County. By adding an amphitheater, a youth sports field house, library and cultural center, and other infrastructure improvements, the Blue Line Corridor will be the region's next big destination, and Prince Georgians will have access to a walkable, amenity-rich destination right in their own backyard. As we look forward to expanding our ability to spur investment in other parts of the county, working across multiple agencies, including partners from inside and outside of government, we are working intently to incorporate additional investment from the bipartisan infrastructure law to leverage opportunities that will significantly amplify our ability to create jobs and amenities for our residents in Prince George's. This coalition of bi-county, state, and federal partners, as well as representatives from our private sector development teams, is representative of how broad and how committed all of us are to the future of transit-oriented development opportunities and our vision for economic growth in our county. As we turn this vision into reality, we are creating a broader landscape where Prince Georgians can grow and prosper together. Adopting House Bill 12 will add more tools that will accelerate the opportunities for growth before us. As we continue to seize these opportunities, Prince George's County will be well positioned to be one of the region's best places to invest, live, and to work. For these reasons and many others, I ask the members of this House committee to support the passage of House Bill 12. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Executive. Mr. Executive, I presume you want to go next.
Thank you. I suppose largest county first, but best county for all second.
Oh.
So, welcome to Anne Arundel County. You've seen the signs as you come in. That's what they say. Must be true. But we can make it better with more transit-oriented development in our county. We did our Plan 2040, our 20-year plan, just about midway through our first administration. And in our county, development is not always the most popular thing, but we have a lot of wonderful green spaces. And we had to convince the public that we should do development. We do have a crisis. We do need to grow our economy. And the best way to sell it was to remind people that we have train stations where there's real redevelopment that could and should happen. So we are moving forward. We have Odenton is the only TOD designated site right now, but Cromwell Station coming from the light rail, it's the end of the light rail coming out of Baltimore, just north of Glen Burnie. We're going to be meeting next week with the Smart Growth Coordinating Committee to get that designation, we hope. We also have BWI. And we're hoping that Laurel, where there's the old MARC station, the old wave down the train station, we want to turn that into a real station. So all four of those sites are places where real development can and should happen. Odenton, we've just we've taken our TIF money, and just with the Board of Public Works, they agreed to lease to us long-term, I think it's 4 acres for 1,000 structured parking sites so that we can increase the ridership on that MARC line. That's our most used station, but that's going to jumpstart some great development in Odenton that has been waiting for the structured parking. But having a fund that we can apply for design plans, public infrastructure improvements, and gap funding will be very useful to us. We have a housing trust fund that's flexible like this. Having a TOD fund that's flexible like this will be a great tool, and I think it'll make things happen that wouldn't otherwise. So thank you for your consideration of this bill, and we hope to see this fund operating soon. Thank you.
Of course. Yes, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, committee members, my name is John Laria. I'm the managing partner of Ballard Spahr's Baltimore office. We're a national law firm with offices in Baltimore and D.C. and a Maryland-wide practice. I'm also the chair of the Transportation Mobility Committee of the Greater Baltimore Committee, which, as some of you know, is a 68-year-old organization whose members are the largest businesses and institutions in Greater Baltimore, plus many others. With our counterparts at the Greater Washington Partnership, we've launched the Baltimore Transit Future Campaign, which is intended to create a world-class public transit system in Greater Baltimore. I know you'll be hearing more about this. The idea of the campaign is to commit leadership from the business and institutional community to something that is critically important to our tens of thousands of employees who need a reliable, safe, and equitable way to get to work and return home, and also to access essential services. I also wore, I guess, another hat. From 2008 to 15, I chaired the State Sustainable Growth Commission. And with broad membership on that commission, we worked to develop smart and equitable growth policies, and that means building and investing where we have already invested, good money after good, and not sprawling into precious farmlands and forests or chasing sprawl development with expensive infrastructure. TOD is a perfect example of investing where we've already invested, at transit stops and hubs across the state. The 2 county executives you heard have opportunities in their counties that are literally the best in the United States of America, not just in Maryland, and we should invest there. TOD not only encourages more transit ridership, but it brings other benefits, less congestion, reduced roadway fatalities, better access to jobs and housing. But those are expensive things to do at transit stations, and we need support from the state. The Growth Commission's work led to legislation, a suite of laws, but the last one, as the delegate said, was in 2010, and it's time to get back to work. This bill is an excellent start on that next chapter, and we urge your support. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And
Thank you. Sorry. All right. Good to see you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tricia Swanson, and I am the Acting Director of Care First Blue Cross Blue Shield. It's not often that you guys have a health insurer in your committee, so it's good to see all of you. And while I'm here on behalf of the region's largest healthcare insurer, Care First also is here because we're an employer and we're a business in Maryland partnering with many stakeholders across the state. Care First currently has 12 offices across the state, equating in over 1 million square feet, and we have over 4,600 employees in Maryland. And we recognize the importance of transit, not only for our employees, but also for the millions of Maryland families who depend on our services. Not only can investments in better transit ensure our employees get to work safely and efficiently, but it can also support our mission to improve health outcomes by allowing more people to access health care. I know all of you have heard from your constituents about telehealth, and this has been a huge step forward in expanding access, but people still need to be able to visit doctor's offices and other appointments to round out the care that they receive. So whether you're approaching this legislation from a social determinants of health perspective or a business and employer in Maryland, this legislation will expand the state's toolbox to encourage more developers to invest in development around transit stations. This means that more Maryland communities can reap the benefits of transit-oriented development, and those Marylanders who rely on transit can access more opportunities. Care First is a proud member of the Greater Baltimore Committee and the Greater Washington Partnership. We're also a strong supporter of the Baltimore Transit Future Campaign, which you heard a little about. It's a collaborative effort to ensure we are advancing projects and policies that will create a world-class transportation system for the greater Baltimore region and to create a shared economic prosperity to catalyze inclusive growth. In closing, we thank Delegate Lewis for his sponsorship of this legislation and ask the committee for a favorable report to continue prioritizing improvements in the region's transit system. Thank you.
Tricia, what was your title with Blue Cross Blue Shield?
Acting Director.
Wow, okay, good for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, and let me call up Dom Butchko. Dom, why don't you come up here, give us your 2 minutes, and then we'll go straight into questions.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Dominic Butchko with the Maryland Association of Counties. I cannot updo two of my favorite county executives, so Mako is a me too. Great bill, and we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Too, where you really say very little other than me too. So do we have any questions? Somebody, yeah, there we go. Welcome back.
Thank you. Yes. Please stop. Thank you very much for the bill, Delegate. And so I think one of the questions I love this, I love TOD, but one of the questions I have, hoping to ask both county executives, but happy that we still have our Madam County Executive from Prince George's County. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the plans that the counties, or even at the state level, that we are embarking upon to really maximize the use of funds under the bipartisan infrastructure law, specifically when it comes to the discretionary grants and when it comes to some of the standards they're looking for counties and locales to be doing around job quality and equity. So some of the examples that they actually list under a RAISE grant, for example, is partnership with registered apprenticeship programs, looking at local hire, targeted local hire, project labor agreements, and so on and so forth, even around sourcing and contracting. And so I wanted to know what is a plan for us to maximize this investment that we're hoping to make under this legislation with the federal dollars in order for Maryland, but also our jurisdictions to be more competitive.
So thank you so much. Prince George's County benefited recently from a raise grant from the federal government of about $20.5 million. Part of your question has to do with equity and how we're using this. Prince George's County is really committed to making sure that we benefit every part of our community. That means, for example, we're working with Employ Prince George's inside of our county to make sure that workforce development is a huge component of what we're doing. We are also working to make sure that when we think about equity, as we grow our communities, that we are also focusing on affordable housing. So we have basically a dual track that we're working on. We are here working to make sure that transit-oriented development and that the infrastructure dollars are there. But we also know that you can't have economic development or economic growth without affordable housing. And so we are likewise making huge investments in workforce housing and affordable housing to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to benefit from what we are doing there, from what we're growing. So equity is a huge piece of what we're doing. You talk about contracting. We're also making sure that minority and local businesses have a huge part in what we're doing. We just met just yesterday with members of our minority community, business community, to make sure that we're also making investments in businesses, local community-based and minority businesses in our county, and that we're working as well with the labor community, that they have an opportunity. We are recently supported legislation to make sure that we're using a project labor agreement for some of the work that we're doing, infrastructure work that we're doing there. So we are hoping to raise all ships as we grow. We want to make sure that every part of Prince George's County has an opportunity to grow and to benefit.
Good. Thank you. I'm good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Lewis, I was actually going to ask this of County Executive Pittman as well, but I can ask you as well. As you might know, there's talk about establishing kind of a Baltimore area, greater Baltimore area regional transit authority that would presumably include the county, the city, Anne Arundel County, and I think Howard County, something along those lines. So my main question is, would the establishment of that authority complicate, jurisdictionally some of the provisions of this bill? Would it help? Would it be helped by that? Would that affect it at all from where you're standing?
No, I think it would complement it. So I just want to do a little bit of background that I didn't do initially. So this bill was introduced along with a package of other bills last year of how we can kind of upgrade and modernize our transit approach statewide. That included a bill by Delegate Solomon last year about essentially connecting with what Virginia is doing and taking more ownership with Amtrak and MARC and things of that nature. That's also connected with the bill that Delegate Corman has with the Metro Rail Authority that they're trying to do.
Right.
This is another tool that we're trying to hope to particularly incentivize. And I just want to state something that I pulled here. I had my staff put together. So we have 14 MTA Metro subway links, 33 light rail stations, 26 WMATA stations in Maryland, 38 MARC commuter rail stations, and over 4,500 MTA bus stations, not including WMATA or local bus operators. We have a lot of transit sites, right? So, this isn't going to address all of this at all. We need as many tools as possible to really take and create that type of dynamic transit-oriented environment where there is affordable housing, where our workers can live and access as possible.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate, Madam Executive, you mentioned 400 acres, so I use the word live, work, play. I'm looking at the map. What stations would that be located near along the Metro?
So it would be the Morgan Station, Morgan Boulevard, Largo, Addison Road, Capitol Heights. So it is essentially from Morgan Boulevard and travels all the way down Capitol Heights, goes all the way down toward the district line. And that would be the Blue Line corridor.
Okay, yeah, I was just, when you said 400 acres, I'm okay, where am I on the map here? So I pulled the map up to try to get smart. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Going to go to Delegate Lehman's bills, House Bill 20 and then 94 in that order. Thanks a lot, guys. Good seeing you, Melissa. Hey. Okay, do you have anybody you'd like to call up?
Mr. Chairman, if the Horse Council is here, I think I have a witness from the Horse
Okay.
Council. The helmet bill is the first bill, HB 20?
Yeah,
Is that
that's
correct?
right, yeah.
Unless they're maybe not in person? Yeah. Yeah, and I have two other witnesses coming up to be on my panel, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. I did caution my witnesses to not touch the buttons. So good afternoon, Chair Barvey and Vice Chair Stein and colleagues. For the record, I'm Delegate Mary Lehman, urging your support for HB 20, which requires helmets for equestrians under age 18 who are riding on public trails and other public land. If the bill sounds familiar to some of you, it's because the committee voted it out favorably last year with significant help, I might add, from the Motor Vehicle Subcommittee. Thank you, Delegate Love. And it passed the full House, but alas, our friends in JPR did not see fit to move the bill. So I am presenting this bill as it passed out of ENT and the full House with just one change, exempting the Amish and Mennonite community, and if you ask me why during the Q&A, I'll be glad to explain that. Equestrian injuries are, not surprisingly, primarily the result of a fall, and falling from a horse is not an uncommon occurrence. So we're attempting to protect young equestrians from concussions and other serious brain and head injuries by requiring them to wear a helmet when riding on public land. So you're going to hear some stories from equestrians about actual accidents that they or those they know have been involved in and how quickly those incidents occur involving even the most skilled riders. While there's no concussion-proof helmet, an equestrian helmet that meets or exceeds the standards of the American Society of Testing and Materials will definitely help protect minor riders. HB 20, again, only applies to minors riding horses on public roads, public riding paths, or other public property. It also applies to minors riding donkeys, mules, and ponies. It does not apply to youth who are practicing for or competing in events where helmets are not normally worn, those who are crossing a public road that just separates two pieces of private land, and those who are engaged in agricultural activities. And all of those exemptions were in last year's bill. The bill does require that adults supervising minor riders ensure that the youth are wearing a properly fitted, secured helmet. And while an adult present and directly supervising a minor may receive a written citation, if the adult is supervising multiple youth, it is still only one citation. So think about an adult maybe in charge of a whole Girl Scout or Boy Scout troop. The adult would get one citation if one or more of the riders was not wearing a helmet. Use of an appropriate equestrian helmet should really be as commonplace as booster seats and car seats for children. And we already require minors to wear bike helmets, and we should do that. It's a great law, but a fall from a horse, if you think about it, is far more dangerous than a fall from a bicycle. A horse is on average 5 feet tall and weighs 800 to well over 1,000 pounds. And besides being injured in the fall itself, a rider is at risk of being kicked or trampled by a horse after falling. So we know of, in the fiscal note, you'll see there are on average 20 to 30 head injuries reported among equestrians per year, and that's to the two trauma centers in the state of Maryland. However, we have no data on the overall number of falls or the number of riders who are actually safeguarded by helmets. And why is that? Because when no one is seriously injured, incidents are not reported, right? So anyway, this is a preventive measure that will keep our young riders safer, and I urge your favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who would like to go next?
I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Barbie. It's a pleasure to be back and to see you all again. Our written testimony contains some data and statistics about the incidence of head injuries and in riding accidents and the role of helmets in preventing serious injury, so I won't repeat them here. I do want to make one point, though, however, as the former owner of a large riding lesson, boarding, and training barn in Montgomery County. Many horse organizations and venues in Maryland do promote helmet safety and do encourage or require riders to wear helmets, adults and children, while mounted. Many lesson barns also do, often because it's a requirement of their insurance companies. But it's not uncommon to get some pushback from students and sometimes even remarkably from their parents who don't want to wear helmets. So the passage of this law would give some extra cover to those owners of facilities who would like to be able to enforce the helmet law. It would help a lot if we could have the law behind our backs on that one. Finally, I want to draw your attention to the letter from Dr. Erica Gertner, which is in our written testimony. Dr. Gertner was very interested in testifying but had to be out of the country this week. She is a primary care sports medicine specialist at LifeBridge Health Sports Medicine Institute. She's the team physician for Loyola University here in Maryland, and she's the medical director for the National Steeplechase Association, which is also headquartered here in Maryland. As I said, she's out of the country, but she really wanted to weigh in with her support of the bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And for the record, that was Jane Siegler.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm
out of practice.
We all are. Who would like to go next? Give us your name and then your 2 minutes.
Yeah, why don't
Hi, everyone. My name is Gretchen Butts. I would like to thank you, Chairman Barbet, and members of the committee. I am here today after being appalled, actually shocked, if you will, given that horseback riding is consistently ranked as one of the most perilous sports for humans. As statistics were noted, our risk riding horses is greater than that of people who cycle, play football, ski, motocross, and the like. And the majority of horse-related hospitalizations are for TBI, traumatic brain injuries, that their severity is directly related to helmet use. And finally, that no helmet laws for minors when riding horses exist in this state. To me, this omission is not acceptable as something that defines our state's care and standards. I believe I'm well qualified to share my thoughts with you. I have a strong background in healthcare as a practicing nurse practitioner for 25 years and with horses. My husband and I own and operate a 220-acre equestrian facility in Montgomery County that 80 horses call their home. We're a third-generation family business and, among other things, provide education, teaching, boarding, competitions, et cetera, a variety of services. I'm also a very experienced national and international judge and technical delegate, and have participated on many safety committees of the U.S. Eventing Association and the U.S. Equestrian Federation. I was also the technical official at several Olympic Games, 1996, 2008, and the World Equestrian Games, 2010, 12, 16, and likely will be at Paris in 24. 2 focal points to share, worth repeating. Horseback riding is enjoyed by many Marylanders of all ages, but it remains a very dangerous activity. All minors must wear a helmet when they're mounted. That's virtually a no-brainer. And I see I'm almost out of time. So all it takes, to me, is one horrific accident with a critical or fatal injury to become headline news, which, again, is very tragic, but it becomes a personal interest story.
If you could wrap up, please.
I will. Again, you have the ability to make this change, and I urge you to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you, Chair and Committee, for being here today to hear me out. My name is Victoria Picca. I am 16 and a junior at Genesee High School. I'm here to testify at the request of the Maryland Horse Council. I'm a youth board member of the council and an avid equestrian myself. I've been riding and caring for horses for more than 12 years. As an active member of the Elkridge Hartford Hunt Pony Club and the United States Polo Association, I have been given the opportunity to compete at the national level for multiple disciplines. I have a great level of concern about the lack of requirements for wearing helmets. During my many years of riding, I have witnessed, unfortunately, many injuries and accidents. Recently, my polo coach, who has decades more experience than myself, had a very unfortunate and unpredictable accident when her horse suffered an aneurysm while playing. She collapsed and fell on top of my coach. It was very sad, very heartbreaking for me to see that. Without proper protective gear, my coach could have been seriously injured, but luckily, because of her helmet and safety gear, she walked away with only minor injuries. Sadly, I could not say the same for the horse. We are very sorry for her loss. I am asking the committee to issue a very favorable report on the House Bill 20 to protect our youth and hopefully many other members of my community while enjoying the wonderful sports horses have to offer. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a question from Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Lehman, very straightforward question. We have helmet laws for minors on bicycles, but not horses. Is that correct?
Thank you for asking that. It's a great question, and I was surprised to learn a number of lawmakers were not even aware, especially over in the Senate. I had to prove to one of the members of JPR that we do, in fact, have a bicycle helmet law. And as I said, falling off a horse, I think most people would agree, is more dangerous than falling off a bicycle. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Delegate Naraki.
Delegate, just over here. Delegate Lehman, I'm over here. Sorry, all good. I see there's an exemption for 3 counties, St. Mary's, Charles, and Worcester. Is that for the Amish population?
Yeah, no, actually, thank you for asking that. That is, that exemption, are you looking in the fiscal note?
Yes.
Yeah, that exemption is an existing law. And what that speaks to in Charles, St. Mary's, and Worcester is that there is a limit on people riding any animal-drawn vehicle on certain roadways where the speed limit is more than 35 miles an hour. So that's already in the law. This bill does not touch that. The Amish and Mennonite exemption, since you raised that as part of your question, was actually requested by Senator Bailey, who last year was on JPR, and he wanted to know, does the bill address them? And I said, well, no, it's silent. He has a significant Amish and Mennonite population in St. Mary's County, and said that he was more concerned, and the bill was not clear on whether someone, not directly on a horse or a donkey or a mule, but someone like the Amish do, riding in a cart that's drawn by a horse, whether that person would have to wear a helmet. That's how they, that's their most common mode of transportation. So I asked the AG's office if the Amish and Mennonite communities could be exempt, and they said, yes, in fact, they are exempt from other laws. So that's why the exemption ended up in there.
Thank you, Delegate.
Okay, thank you, Delegate. No further questions, and that ends the bill hearing for House Bill 20. If you want to go to House Bill 94.
Mr. Vice Chair, I was looking for panelists. I have the Washington Area Bicycle Association. Yeah. And I thought I had the Coalition for Martyr Grove, the Cheryl Court. Cheryl, have you seen her? No? Okay. Okay. I will get started then. So, good afternoon, Vice Chair Stein and Colleagues, again, for the record, I am Mary Lehman, asking for your favorable support of HB 94. This is enabling legislation that allows county and municipal governments to lower the maximum speed limit to 15 miles per hour on certain roadways after performing an engineering traffic study. Simply put, the purpose of this bill is going to be, and will save lives. So if the legislation sounds familiar, like the last bill, to many of you it should. The committee approved it last year. It passed the full House with bipartisan support. Again, our friends in JPR did not move it. So there are two compelling reasons for the committee, I believe, to pass this bill again. And the first is that in the 2021 session, we gave permission to Montgomery County and only Montgomery County, because it was a local bill, to lower speed limits on Montgomery County roads to 15 miles an hour after an engineering study. Montgomery had been asking for that authority for 3 years. It passed on the third request. So what does that mean? It means that Montgomery gets to do that and make its roads safer. But I would say, and I would hope you would agree, that the other 22 counties in Baltimore City should also have that ability to lower local speed limits if they choose. Again, this is enabling legislation. So the second reason to pass the bill is that excessive speed is a factor in more than 1/3 of traffic deaths nationwide, more than a third. It's a fact. Lower speed limits save lives. Multiple counties across the state and MDOT's Highway Safety Office have committed significant resources to what they call their Vision Zero plans, and those are their goals of getting to zero traffic fatalities. Traffic fatalities have been a serious problem in Maryland, and they have remained stubbornly high, even during the last 4 years or so, with fewer cars on the road, especially during the peak of COVID. Already in the first 32 days of this year, and I do give MDOT credit, it's keeping very up to date on fatalities. So through Wednesday of this week, we have statistics through February 1st. Already we have lost 37 of our neighbors in traffic accidents. And that includes 21 drivers, 7 passengers, 7 pedestrians, and 1 bicyclist. The remaining fatality is still under investigation. In 2022, Maryland State Police reported that there were 547 traffic deaths, down just slightly from 563 in 2021, 573 in 2020, and 535 in 2019. Drivers are the most likely to be killed, followed by pedestrians. Since 2019, almost 2,000 citizens have been killed in traffic accidents. That includes 1,357 drivers, 531 pedestrians, 321 passengers, and 43 bicyclists. So again, the goal of HB 94 is to reduce those fatalities as well as injuries and just make Maryland roads safer. Really quickly, one final point, Mr. Vice Chair, about speed cameras. The 2021 Montgomery County bill was amended by the Judicial Proceedings Committee to say that the county could not install new speed cameras where those speed limits are reduced to 15 miles per hour. So this statewide bill specifies the same thing. There can be no speed cameras placed in these zones. And so in closing, again, I'm asking the committee to give our local jurisdictions the authority to lower their speed limits after an engineering study, and I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Delegate. John?
Thank you, Vice Chair Stein, members of the committee. My name is John Corn. I'm president of Bicycle Advocates for Annapolis and Anne Arundel County, also known as Bike AAA. I also served on the 2017 Maryland Bicycle Safety Task Force created by this legislature. I just want to say that I'm happy to be back in the room since COVID. As was mentioned, the state adopted Vision Zero, and Anne Arundel County adopted Vision Zero last year. And as Delegate Lehman said, speed is a significant factor, and yet when we read crash reports, we often see this phrase, speed was not a factor. I would submit to you that speed is always a factor. Even if the driver was at the speed limit, speed is always a factor. It affects braking distance, it affects reaction time, and importantly for the group that I represent, which is people moving around outside of a vehicle, on foot, on bike, on scooter, etc., the severity of injury increases with speed. Recent Federal Highway Authority report said that at 23 miles an hour, a pedestrian is 10% likely to be killed in a crash. At 42 miles an hour, 50%, and at 58 miles an hour, 90%. So speed is always a factor. This bill will empower local jurisdictions who know their roads and neighborhoods best to reduce speed limits where appropriate. I hope you'll find favorable view of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Priscilla Candia here? You want to come up and testify?
You ready? Okay. Good afternoon. Well, Vice Chair, you're not Chairman Barbie, but okay, and members of the committee. I'm Priscilla Cania, AARP Maryland Volunteer Lead Advocate and resident of Anne Arundel County. AARP is the largest membership organization in Maryland, representing those who are 50 and over. AARP Maryland has over 850,000 members, and AARP Maryland supports HB 94, and we thank Delegates Lehman and the other sponsors of this bill for this very important legislation. AARP Maryland believes every jurisdiction in Baltimore City should have the ability to change driving speeds. Everyone should feel safe crossing a street, but the streets can be dangerous, especially for older Americans. The number of pedestrians killed by vehicles rose 35% in the past decade, and the death rate is almost twice as high for people over 75 as the general population. Making streets safe has been an important issue for AARP. AARP Maryland advocates for everyone, including pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, and transit riders of all ages and abilities to have safe streets. Case in point, last week, a 74-year-old bicyclist was killed in a hit and run right here in Anne Arundel County. And our own AARP lobbyist, who many of you know, Tammy Bresnahan, lost her brother, a Vietnam vet, at age 60 when he was out for his evening stroll in Pasadena. Walking and bicycling promote physical and mental health for all ages. Walking is the second most popular means of getting around after driving, and many communities are not designed to promote walking and bicycling. Residential areas are often far from commercial facilities. Sidewalks are often non-existent and in poor condition. Crosswalk signals are often not timed for the slower. Oh, gosh. Please support this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Is Tom Butchko here?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Dominic Butchko, Maryland Association of Counties. I think we heard some pretty compelling reasons why this legislation should be passed. The committee passed the bill last year. Counties urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you for that succinct testimony. And remotely, we have Peter Gray. Welcome.
Thank you, Vice Chair Stein. My name is Peter Gray. I represent the Washington Area Bicyclist Association and its 1,500 plus members and several thousands of other supporters who live in the state of Maryland. I also am the co-chair for a group called Montgomery County Families for Safe Streets, which is just what it sounds like. You have my written testimony. I want to echo the things that Delegate Lehman and John Corrin said about speed. In my role working with Montgomery County Families for Safe Streets, we do memorials for bicyclists and pedestrians who die in Montgomery County, mostly on our state highways. And I have to say these memorials are tragic. They provide some solace and support for the families. But frankly, I want to stop attending these memorials. I want to stop conducting these memorials. I want the legislature to acknowledge, as John said, that speed matters and that we need to give our local jurisdictions all the tools that they can in order to make the streets safer. I therefore urge a favorable report on HB 94. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a witness who's virtual, is favorable with amendments. We'll take them now, and then we'll take questions. So Seth Grimes. Mr.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
And members of the committee. My name is Seth Grimes. I am a resident of Montgomery County and a former elected Tacoma Park City Council member and a community advocate working on issues including pedestrian, bicyclist, and roadway safety. I support HB 94 with amendments. Every jurisdiction in Maryland should have the ability to decrease speed limits to 15 miles an hour for reasons that have already been given. However, I will focus on what it takes to use that authority. As it currently stands, an engineering study is required, and this is onerous. If a jurisdiction wants to decrease the speed limit on a street, to have to study the engineering and characteristics on an individual street makes it extremely difficult. I note that the District of Columbia, effective July 1st, 2020, lowered the speed limit on all local streets, that is residential streets that primarily serve neighborhoods, to 20 miles an hour. They did that jurisdiction-wide. Having a patchwork of speed limits on set of comparable streets is going to be confusing, and it's particularly hard to enforce whatever the mechanism. The Maryland General Assembly recognized that when enacting the legislation that would be altered here, 21803, by saying that Baltimore City may, without performing an engineering and traffic investigation, lower its speed limits. I ask you, as an amendment, to replace paragraph A4 with similar language saying Montgomery County and Montgomery County municipalities may, without performing an engineering and traffic investigation, lower its speed limits. I'd love to see you make that change for all of Maryland, but I will limit myself to Montgomery County at this moment, since Montgomery County already has limited authority to lower speed limits to 15 miles an hour. So please pass a favorable review of HB 94 with amendment to replace paragraph 4 to say the Montgomery County and Montgomery County municipalities may, without performing an engineering and traffic investigation, lower its speed limits. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we do have a couple questions. First one goes to Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to understand this authority, kind of the opposite of the previous witness. I want to make sure that there's, if it involves any state highway, and this does, correct?
I'm not sure what your question is about.
Well, does this bill also include
So
any state roads?
Yeah, it's meant to be really on residential roads for the most part. Right now, under state law, with the exception of Montgomery County, a county or municipality cannot lower a speed limit on any type of roadway lower than 20 miles per hour. And from the statistics you heard, the slower a car is going, the less likelihood when there's an accident that someone gets seriously hurt or killed. And I think, you know, Chairman Barve last session expressed some concern, and in fact expressed this consistently when the Montgomery County bill came forward. I don't think, you know, there needs to be a balance. I don't think anyone wants to see every street being 15 miles an hour. We would never get where we were going. And so I believe the engineering language was a compromise. I did try to get information from Montgomery on how many roads so far have been designated as 15 miles per hour now that they've had the law for about a year, but I don't know that. But it's not meant to be on highways, certainly, or busier roadways. But that's the reason for the study as well, and I assume part of that study process includes public engagement. The public probably has, you know, all of our constituents probably have many ideas about roadways where they would like to see the speed limit lowered.
Well, I mean, I think municipal roadways can fall under municipal jurisdiction under their engineering, but if it entails any part of a state road, I think the state should also have be checking off on the engineering is what I'm trying to say. And I think if I'm reading this bill correctly, it's not just municipal streets involved in this bill, it's also state roads. correct?
Can I follow up with you on that one? Let me reach out to my engineers because I might be wrong on this, but I don't think counties can lower speed on a state road, but I will follow up and have it
I'm not
answered.
talking about county roads, I'm talking about municipal roads that are not a state-owned road. But this bill goes beyond local roads into state roads, correct?
Delegate Jacobs, I've never heard of a scenario where that was ever allowed, and I'd be happy to help look into it too. But again, this is meant to be mostly for local roads, and there are some roads I'm sure you have in your district. I do. 212 Powder Mill Road comes to mind. Half of that is a county road, and half of it is, it's the same road, but half of it is maintained by the county and half by the state. But I don't know of any scenario where a local government, a municipality can lower a speed limit on a county road or a county on a state road. I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it's my similar understanding.
Well, I just want to make sure if it's a state road involved in this legislation, that the state would have also the ability to check off on the engineering as well. In other words, if you had your engineering done and wanted to lower the speed limit and it involves anything of a state road, that the state would also have to check off. That's what I'm saying. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it's levels of government. So like the state sets the speed limit on the state roads. The local jurisdiction, my understanding, doesn't play a lot in that. The counties only set the speed limit on county roads, and this shouldn't change that relationship. So if a county wants to lower a speed limit on a county road, a municipality on a municipality road, you know, does that make sense?
I think we missed the point of each other's conversation a little bit, but I'll tell you, Delegate Lehman, I'll follow up with you.
Okay.
Because I want to make sure it's clear on what
No,
road-
I
on what
appreciate it,
roads
Delegate Jacobs. Just to remind all of you again, it is enabling legislation. So it is up to, you know, if we do pass this and the Senate passes it, counties can take it up or not. They don't have to. They are not compelled to.
I've got a couple more questions, but I'll take them up with you offline. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and thank you. And Delegate Ndombe, maybe if you could clarify as to whether this would have any applicability to state roads or just non-state roads. Okay, next, Delegate Boyce.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much, Delegate Lemon, for bringing this bill back. I wanted to correct some of the record per the last witness about Baltimore City. Baltimore City completed a complete streets program for which engineering had been completed. Therefore, we had asked for the exemption not to have to, we were looking to lower speed limits potentially in residential areas. And so some of that work was already done, which is why we were exempt essentially from doing those engineering studies, because the work had already been done holistically through the complete streets plan. So I wanted to make that clear for the person who.
So Delegate Boyce, in other words, Baltimore City does not need this to then go forward and where it sees fit to lower speed limits to 15? Is that what you're saying?
Now I was correcting the gentleman who, the last witness virtually mentioned Baltimore City as an exempt from traffic engineering studies, and I was just putting on the record why that was.
Okay.
So
thank you for that.
No problem.
I was not aware of that. Thank you.
Delegate Baker.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Again, I do appreciate it being enabling legislation, letting each county be responsible for themselves. But my question is, you had mentioned, I think, 547 deaths on Maryland roads in 2022. Was that?
Yes, the statistics.
Yes.
The MDOT actually, in looking at its website the other day, I was amazed at how up to date it is, and I think, frankly, Mr. Vice Chair, that's the result of the many Vision Zero bills we've seen come through this committee the last few years. The agency literally had statistics through February 1st, and
Well,
so for this year
would be-
it's 37. But did you ask last year or the year before?
Well, I've referenced 2022, so maybe it was 2021 for 547
Yeah, it was the
deaths.
highest in 2020,
Okay,
I believe, of the last 5 years.
My question would be, do you have that broken down, county roads, state roads?
No,
How many
I
of those
mean,
deaths are interstate?
They do not, I'm not going to say they don't have that information. It's not presented on their website. I would think that they do have it, that if we requested a further breakdown, that is a good question. It was broken out by year and then by categories of driver, passenger, pedestrian, bicyclist, other, and other turned out to be cases that were still under investigation.
I would be very interested in knowing if those number of deaths also include interstate deaths. Interstate
Okay.
70, 81, 270.
Right, I just know that these statistics are reported by Maryland State Police to Maryland Department of Transportation.
But if you could
That's-
find that, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely,
Thank you.
happy to follow up.
Excuse me.
Delegate, if you could push your button.
I'm not supposed to touch the button?
No. Thank you. Okay. No further questions. That concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 94. Thank you, Delegate. We're going to go a little bit out of order. Next bill is House Bill 9. Delegate Ruth.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you so much. For the record, I'm Delegate Sheila Ruth presenting House Bill 9. House Bill 9 passed the General Assembly in 2022, unfortunately was vetoed by then Governor Hogan. I introduced it in the same form that it passed last year, hoping that we can get this through over the finish line this time. This bill is about ensuring equity in our transportation systems. And so I can hear Delegate Boyes asking, what do you mean by equity? And so I will save her the question and answer that I think equity in this case means all Marylanders should have fair access to the benefits of a well-planned transportation system, and that we must ensure that those who have been excluded due to race, ethnicity, national origin, or disability, and those who have been left behind economically should have fair access to jobs, fresh food, health care, economic development, and clean air. HB 9 takes a data-driven approach to ensure this. It has annual reporting requirements on racial and ethnic disparities and impacts on persons with disabilities. It requires transit equity analysis, cost-benefit analysis, and outreach to affected communities prior to any major service change or cancellation or reduction of a capital project in the Consolidated Transportation Program. HB 9 builds on requirements in Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, expanding on them and codifying them into state law. I worked extensively on this with many stakeholders, including the Maryland Department of Transportation. And so the bill that passed last session, which is the one that was introduced, is the result of all of those discussions and that work. If you look at the list of written testimony submitted, you'll see it has broad support from organizations representing a wide variety of interests and communities. I'd like to just briefly mention that Disability Rights Maryland has submitted favorable with amendments, and I believe you'll be hearing from someone from Disability Rights Maryland later. I would consider those amendments friendly amendments, and I would be glad to work with the committee on that. And so, colleagues, I'd like to ask you to please help me finally get this bill across the finish line this year. I ask for a favorable report on House Bill 9. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, members of the committee. I am Emily Ranson with Clean Water Action, here in support of House Bill 9. I'll refer to my written testimony that we submitted with 42 organizations signed on here in support of the Transportation Equity Act. And that concludes my testimony. We urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the Chair, Vice Chair, and Committee for having my testimony. My name is Jose Coronado Flores. I'm a climate research and policy analyst with the organization CASA. I'm here to show support for House Bill 9. CASA, being an organization that represents immigrant and working class communities, is invested in seeing this bill pass because we see the effects that poor transportation project planning has on our communities, especially in its consideration of racial and environmental equity. Many of our members live in communities that are overburdened with transit-related air pollution. Take Langley Park, for example, a place I've called home and where many of our members reside. The intersection at Tacoma-Langley Crossroads sees an immense amount of cars, buses, and construction vehicles every day. The high quantity of air pollution there is hurting us. Growing up, I thought it was normal to smell exhaust everywhere I went, and only until moving to Frederick did I really smell fresh air in my own community. A study from the American Public Transportation Association indicates that per passenger mile traveled, public transit produces only 5% as much carbon monoxide as car use. Maryland can go further with a transit system designed around zero-emission, high-capacity modes of travel in higher-density communities. Yes, our current reality now is that cars help many of us get to where we need to be, but the most congested routes should not be where low-income people of color live. With smarter and more environmentally conscious planning, low-income and community of colors won't get burdened with more 6-lane roads running in every direction like what is happening in Langley Park. Thank you. That is my testimony.
Thank you very much. And welcome back to the committee. And tell the committee the title of your book that you've written.
Thank you, Chair Barve. I have written a book called Voyages of an Oceanless Boat.
Okay. I'm going to check that out after session. So,
Delegate Barve, I actually have a copy for you.
Oh.
Coming in this weekend for our meeting next week.
Okay. Well, that's fabulous. I'm looking forward to reading it. Okay. Who'd like to go next?
Yes. Chairman Barve and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee, greetings. I'm Samuel Jordan, President of the Baltimore Transit Equity Coalition. We urge you to report favorably on HB 9, the Equity in Transportation Sector Act of 2023. HB 9 promotes equity in transportation through anticipation and prevention as the better strategies when compared to penalty and correction, the principal strategies in the past. The 1964 Civil Rights Act, Title VI equivalent provisions are not enforced at the state level. HB 9 provides for such enforcement. HB 9 is distinguished by the requirement that changes in transportation policy must be justified before they can be implemented, not after implementation. The bill's provisions would have prevented cancellation of the Red Line project in 2015, the 15-month exposure of riders to derailment on the subway in 2018, and MTA's proposal of permanent racially disparate budget cuts in the core bus service in 2020. HB 9's anticipation and prevention strategies protect the public in public transportation. Due to the bill's mandatory prior due diligence provision, the cost of policy change implementation will be reduced. HB 9 is also cost-effective. HB 9 has major implications for climate change response and environmental protection. If, for example, MDOT-MTA put zero-emission buses in service on routes only serving mostly white passengers, HB 9 would reject such disparate distribution of the benefits of zero-emissions vehicles. Finally, we would alert the committee to the equity goals of this legislature, its leadership, and our new governor. With the enactment of HB 9, Maryland will become the leader among the states of this nation in the enforcement of Title VI equivalent equity protections in public transportation. Chairman Barve and members of the committee, we again urge you to report favorably on HB 9. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Thank you so much to Delegate Ruth for introducing this very important bill. My name is Ioana Stoica, and I'm a policy advocate at the Job Opportunities Task Force. We are an organization that works on advancing policies that remove barriers to employment. In addition to advancing legislation, we also run a workforce training development program in the trades of carpentry, plumbing, and electrical, serving primarily formerly incarcerated individuals. Virtually all of our participants rely on public transportation, which is extremely unreliable in Baltimore City, where we are located. At our last round of interviews in December, I was speaking with a young man who had walked for over an hour to get to the interview location because the bus system in the city has eroded so much over the past couple years to the point where residents are saying that the only thing they can count on reliably are cancellations and delays. Part of the problem has been that there's been a lot of redirection of funds from public transportation projects in places like Baltimore City to highway expansion serving predominantly white or high-income neighborhoods. One example of this that you're probably familiar with is the Red Line project and how its funding was cut a few years ago. That project would have significantly expanded access to employment and spurred economic development in the city. But instead, our residents were left behind to fend for themselves in getting to work, to the doctor, or to the grocery store in places that are already food deserts. On an important note to keep in mind is that low-income residents are also much more likely to work in the evenings or the night shift, so already transportation is much more of an issue during those times. Because mobility is key to our economy and to people's well-being, when inequitable decisions are made, our low-income residents and our residents of color are disproportionately impacted, which is why we urge a favorable report on this bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. It's nice to be back in your committee and nice to see you all for this session. House Bill 9 is a collaborative bill, and AARP believes that states should adopt plans that enhance the mobility of all Marylanders. It reminds me when I was in the committee hearing yesterday listening to Senator Carter, who is the cross-file of this bill, talk about someone who was trying to get to a meeting across town in Baltimore. Well, we have an older woman who volunteers with us who lives in Baltimore on Tudor Street. And she would love to come down to the Baltimore City delegation meetings before the pandemic on Fridays. It took her literally, she's 79 years old. It literally took her 5 hours utilizing public transportation to get from Baltimore City to Annapolis, utilizing bus, the light rail, and then another bus. And so when you're considering transportation options, we like for you to consider all options, including older Marylanders. And I'll leave you with one statistic when you're thinking about older Marylanders. There are more people over the age of 65 in Maryland than there are children in public school. And so when you think about those statistics, and we're only, unfortunately, getting older, we need to make resources and services available to those folks. So we thank Delegate Ruth for putting this bill in. We urge a yes vote on House Bill 9, and thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Let's turn now. We have a person who's favorable with amendments, Gabriel Rubenstein with the Disability Rights Maryland. Gabe, okay. Good to see you. Welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the chair, vice chair, and committee for hearing my testimony today. My name is Gabriel Rubenstein, and I'm an attorney with Disability Rights Maryland, the state's protection and advocacy system to advance the rights of people with disabilities. I'm also providing testimony today on behalf of Consumers for Accessible Ride Services, an advocacy group of paratransit riders with disabilities. HB 9 is significant to people with disabilities. It impacts how transportation services affect access to education, healthcare, employment, and decent housing. While our testimony focuses on persons with disabilities, we recognize the intersectionality with persons of color. Our legacy of race, ethnicity, and disability discrimination has driven our patterns of segregation. We joined the Maryland Centers for Independent Living, nonprofit disability advocacy organizations located throughout Maryland, operated by and for people with disabilities, in requesting minor yet meaningful changes. The definition in HB 9 of disparate impact should be amended to include disability. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act prohibits discrimination based on race, color, and national origin, but the Americans with Disability Act and the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 prohibit disability discrimination, including government actions creating a disparate impact. Additionally, the bill's language treats disability different than race and ethnicity. It qualifies the advisory committee's identification of indicators for people with disabilities to the extent data is available. If no data is identified for persons with disabilities, no equity analysis of the impact of transit decisions on people with disabilities will be conducted. We recommend amending page 3, lines 24 to 25 to read, recommend indicators that can be evaluated for racial, disability, and ethnic disparities as such data is available or can reasonably be obtained. Due to the time constraints today, I would just refer the committee to my submitted written testimony for a summary of the additional very similar minor changes. And we are very excited about this legislation, and we hope with amendments, we heartily support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll proceed to questions. First question goes to Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Delegate Ruth, heard from, there's a couple letters in here were submitted in testimony. Maryland Transportation Builders and also Maryland Asphalt Association. And some of their membership are constituents of mine, and they're asking for a seat at the table. There's no one from construction in the membership of this. There were 2 new members added in this legislation, but there's no one in the entire group that's from the construction end of it. Would you consider that amendment?
Delegate, I really appreciate the question, and I certainly think that they should have a seat at the table. However, this particular group that we're adding people to is an advisory commission specifically for that looks at the data regarding Maryland's attainment of its goals. In the previous version of the bill that I introduced last session, there was also a Commission on Transportation Equity, and I would have loved to have included them on that. However, that was amended out, and as I said, I introduced the version of the bill that passed last session. And so this particular Attainment Advisory Committee, because it's very focused on a specific thing, and the Maryland Department of Transportation has had, trouble getting enough people to, filling all the spots as it is and getting quorum and that type of thing. They really didn't want a lot of people added to it.
So you're not interested in adding anyone from construction?
If the committee would like to add them, I certainly would not oppose it. But I just, we would need to talk to the Department of Transportation about that as well.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Delegate Jacobs, actually, for that question. I was going to ask the same thing about that, because when we talk about equity, the jobs also available for a good number of people are in construction, where the buses don't come early enough. And so I hope the committee will consider someone from transportation at the seat of the table, because while night jobs are great, sometimes we want folks to be able to graduate enough to be able to take a bus to a construction site, which they cannot do now. So that's a consideration.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions for the sponsor or this panel? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. That concludes the public hearing on House Bill 9. We will go to House Bill 71, Delegate Sample Hughes. Welcome to the committee, Madam Speaker Pro Tem. Here we go.
All right. Good afternoon. As my panel gets settled, good afternoon, Chairman Barvey and Chairman Stein. Thank you for the opportunity to present this bill on today, and to the members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. It's great to be before you on today. Today, I do ask for your favorable support on House Bill 71, which is School Vehicles Drivers Medical Examinations. This bill in particular is going to address a few points, and we're going to highlight that this afternoon in our brief discussion. In particular, as it stands, the state of Maryland requires an annual medical certification for drivers, school bus drivers. What this piece of legislation does is almost like enabling legislation. It will allow a jurisdiction to make the decision as to whether or not they choose to require annual certification, or they have the ability to go up to 2 years. So we're not dictating saying everything has to go to 2 years. The jurisdiction can be more restrictive if they choose to. So keeping that in mind, we also need to be aware, and this is what will be shared as well, that it is now that the medical certifications have to be done by a physician that is nationally certified. And so what we're finding is that those persons that are nationally certified are plentiful in some areas of the state, but in other areas, they're not plentiful. And so case in point, I'm looking at Kent County, whereas versus maybe Prince George's County, you may have a plethora of those individuals that to certify these annual certifications. The other piece I want to highlight is that our neighboring states, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Virginia, they have the requirement of every 2 years, which matches the federal requirement. So that in of itself can be somewhat competitive for the fact that we are trying to retain school bus drivers, and then some other challenges that will be shared as well. The Maryland Vehicle Administration Medical Review Board over the years has made various changes, which now allows any citizen, a police officer, a parent, or whomever, if they foresee a complaint that needs to be addressed, then they can go directly to this medical review board versus it having to go through another pathway. So there's more eyes and ears on the roadways to get a complaint initiated and then immediately forwarded to the jurisdiction that's in question or the concern that has been raised for that specific school board. And then what I would like to share right before I finish my testimony is that in the fiscal note, I want to just highlight this part of it in regards to the state revenues. There's a sentence that reads, it says, MVA advises that in 2022, 108 individuals lost medical certification and subsequently paid the $20 fee to have endorsement reinstated. The reason I'm bringing this to your attention is I don't want it to be construed that they lost their medical certification because of a problem, meaning that they may have been ill or some issue. The issue that it could have been is that they didn't receive their notification through the mail. They forgot to submit it. I know some of us probably have done the same. And so all of that could very well make you believe that it's because of some medical issue. And then lastly, we know that there's a worker shortage. There's school bus drivers that we're seeing need to be in place. Anne Arundel County, unfortunately, has had a plethora of having a shortage. And certainly the pandemic has caused some of those challenges. So on today, I'm asking for you to, listen to our panel. We have 2 jurisdictions that will share with you some of their challenges. And I'm asking for a favor report for House Bill 71. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Delegate. Who'd like to go next? Okay.
I'll go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, delegates. So I'm Jeff Thompson. I've been the Director of Transportation for St. Mary's County Public Schools for the last 15 years. And today I'm here to support House Bill 71. So by federal requirements, all CDL holders nationwide must maintain an active US DOT medical certificate, which can be valid for up to 2 years. In Maryland, by regulation, not statute, school bus drivers must pass a DOT medical examination annually. This requirement has been in place for many decades and was established at a time when there was very little oversight by federal or state authorities. So why, you're asking why now? Why should this bill before us now? What has changed? Does this maintain safety for our students and school buses? So in the CDL world, a lot has changed over the last 10 years. That provides more oversight at the federal and the state level. These changes have made our regulation antiquated. Here are some key items. So in January of 2014, per the federal requirement, all Maryland CDL drivers must now provide a valid DOT medical examiner certificate to the MVA. MVA tracks these certificates for every CDL holder. In May of 2014, all medical examiners that provide medical certificates must have training, they must pass the test, and they must then be placed in the National Registry of Certified Medical Examiners. This has resulted in far more stringent examinations of CDL holders and not an automatic 2-year approval. Then in 2020, we had the Federal Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse for all motor carriers. In 2022, we have entry-level driver training that went into effect. And in 2025, all medical examiners, therefore, will have to send electronically the medical examinations to the federal database. So with all of the recent federal changes and being administered by MVA, I fully believe if the bill passes, there will be no impact actually to student safety. It is important to keep in mind that if there are concerns, the directors of transportation and the general public, as mentioned, have the ability to submit the request for review to the Medical Advisory Board. I personally sent concerns that have been thoroughly investigated, and drivers have been downgraded or it's been verified. So for many drivers, it's a hassle, this process. It would support them, it would support contractors, and I think it would maintain student safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hughes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and other distinguished delegates. Again, my name is Desmond Hughes. I'm the Director of Transportation for Wycombe County Public Schools. I come before you this afternoon to support House Bill 71 for a number of the reasons that you've already heard from the delegate and also my colleague, Mr. Thompson, but moreover, to really specifically looking at attracting, recruiting, and retaining school bus drivers. As has already been mentioned, the school bus industry was suffering a loss of school bus drivers prior to COVID, and COVID just exacerbated that bleed out. We're trying to do everything we can as student transportation leaders in the state to kind of cauterize that bleed of school bus drivers so that we can transport students safely to and from school and for curricular and extracurricular activities as well. The proposed legislation, as it is written, as delegates already mentioned, will still provide the autonomy and choice for local school districts that if they feel the need to provide an annual physical as is currently written, that they can do so. But will also allow the state to be more aligned with federal regulations so that for those individuals, particularly in my case, who drive on a very limited basis just to help out family and friends, will not suffer because they may have missed the notification from the MVA, thereby jeopardizing their full-time livelihood because they drive other commercial vehicles in the transportation industry. As Mr. Thompson has already mentioned, this proposed legislation will not compromise student safety in any bit, because if we felt that it would compromise student safety, certainly he or myself wouldn't be here in support of such a bill. So again, we ask for your favorable response for House Bill 71. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Speaker Pro Tem, just one question for clarification. So, so currently you have to get an exam every 2 years, every year currently.
Yes.
This will just help us address the shortage.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Correct. Yes, and having that distinction, it helps in numerous ways, as you've heard. But yes, it would require, your jurisdiction to decide whether or not they want to stay with the annual or allow up to 2 years worth of that time frame to accept the examination.
Got it. Just wanted to be clear. Thank you, Mr.
Sure.
Chair.
Thank you. Sure.
Thank you, members of the committee. Just for the record, I want you to know that I'm here to introduce Bill 007. My name is Fraser Hidalgo, David Fraser Hidalgo. I hope you get it. If you don't get it, you're just a generation way too past. So thank you, members of the committee. It's so great to be back, despite the fact that you all seem to think that I'm a traitor. I still love you, and I will always love you. So, I am here to introduce House Bill 007 today, and I have Delegate Ruth with me as well because she has expressed an enormous amount of interest and has an amendment to the bill that's worthy of discussion, and I know she's going to be looking after this bill as it moves along in subcommittee and in committee. So House Bill 007, for those that aren't aware, in this committee, we have had a tradition of promoting electric vehicles. Not only promoting electric vehicles, but promoting electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And as we transition away from the internal combustion engine to electric vehicles, we need to make sure that not only are there incentives to purchase electric vehicles, which we've done a lot of in the last couple of years, but also infrastructure. A bill that has expired is a bill that provides incentives for charging equipment, both for commercial and residential chargers. So when you buy a vehicle and you want to charge it at home, in some cases you have to do some electrical work to either heavy up your home, or in most cases, you don't actually have to heavy up, which is bringing more electricity to the home. You just have to install basically an extra outlet, like a dryer outlet, and some charging infrastructure. So what this bill does is it extends some rebates that is managed by MEA to help kind of bridge that gap financially so that people can purchase electric charging equipment. It also extends it to commercial charging equipment as well. And it takes the current amount of money, which was a ceiling for MEA of $1.8 million annually for the next 4 years, and it increases it to $2 million. But one of the things that's really big that the bill does is that makes it the base. MEA specifically wanted to have a little bit more space above the $2 million because we have IRA money and IIJ money coming. And so they wanted to make sure if they had extra money that they had space to give more money and more rebates to both residents and commercial establishments. That is the gist of the bill. I know there's an amendment that, there's a couple of technical amendments to the bill, but I will turn it over to Delegate Ruth to discuss her amendment to the bill. And then we can, if it's all right with the chair, then we can kind of discuss both, if that's all right.
We still love you.
Thank you. No.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair. The state, one of the things that I've been looking a lot at is gas stations, and the state has, I believe, a strong interest in incentivizing gas stations to install electric vehicle chargers. First of all, they have the locations already, and the use case for gas stations would be if somebody's out running errands and they just need to charge up to finish, or they're on a trip and they need to charge up to finish their trip. Gas stations have the ideal locations for this, and so we need to incentivize them to install the chargers. The types of chargers that they would need are the DC fast chargers, and so the cost of these is much higher than the level 2 chargers. So I believe it's appropriate to have a higher maximum for the gas stations. I've proposed $25,000 for chargers of 50 kilowatts and above, or $50,000 for chargers of 150 kilowatts or above, which is in line with the types of expenses that gas stations are seeing. In addition to incentivizing getting these vehicle chargers out there, I think it's really important to make sure that gas stations are not left behind as we make this clean energy transition. We're in some period of time, maybe a decade, there are not going to be enough gasoline-powered vehicles on the road to support the business of gas stations, and I don't believe we want to see abandoned gas stations dotted all over the state. So it's very important to start transitioning these gas stations over to and helping them to transition their model to a clean energy model. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
And Mr. Chair, just for the record, MEA has some concerns with the amendment. I think in the spirit of the amendment, they're all in, but just the deployment and how that amendment moves forward, there's just some concerns that gas stations may gobble up a big chunk of the money and kind of leaving other commercial and residential out to dry a little bit. So I think that there's some tweaking, and there may need to be some tweaking just on the kilowatts. As you're familiar, maybe a little bit faster charging, things like that. But those are details we can be worked out.
Okay, let's go to the witnesses. If you can stay up there or stay near to there, we'll do the questions when we get through them all. So let's go first to Pete Kitzmiller with the auto dealers. Welcome back to the committee.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Peter Kitzmiller. I'm the president of the Maryland Automobile Dealers Association. We represent 300 franchised new car and truck dealers across the state of Maryland here today in support of House Bill 7. The number one issue, or the number one impediment, I think, for mass adoption of electric vehicles is the access to charging. I don't think there's any question. You know, over the last couple of years, you know, there was always a concern about, for example, electric vehicles. We didn't have a model mix that customers wanted to buy because there weren't any SUVs or pickup trucks, which is 75% of the market, new car market and truck market right now. That's changed. We're going to have 35 individual models for sale in electric models in Maryland by June. Many of those are going to be SUVs and pickups, so that issue's going away. The price, yeah, the price is still an issue. They're still a little more expensive, but the price has been coming down, and I think it will continue. Maybe not as quickly as everybody hopes, but it will continue. And then the third issue was range anxiety. And range anxiety is still an issue, but most of these vehicles now, the new models coming out, are over 300 miles. Most Maryland customers are going to realize that that's going to be sufficient for most of their uses. But at the end of the day, the biggest concern we hear from customers is, how am I going to charge my car? How am I going to get that done? And they're not going to buy it if they don't think that's, they're going to have access to that. And this bill, I think, takes a good step toward doing that, especially for the home charging. Our customers need home charging to be convenient and affordable. This is going to help with the affordable piece of it. The convenient piece we got to work on a little bit. But my members, I just had a call this morning. We are in the process. We started about 6 months ago. Maryland dealers are going to be spending in the tens of millions of dollars in putting in charging infrastructure in order to be able to sell and service electric vehicles. One of the things we look forward to working with this committee on is sort of prioritizing how we do that. And so we look forward to doing that. We'd ask for a favorable report.
Okay, you know, actually, we've got 4 folks who are signed up favorable with amendments. So why don't we take questions for the sponsor and for Mr. Kitzmiller, since they're basically favorable. So let's do that first, and I'm going to go first to Delegate Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Delegate Fraser Hidalgo and Delegate Ruth, for bringing this to us. I really would like to ask about the gas stations, because, I mean, it is a concern. There are businesses in all our communities, and you're right, Delegate Ruth, we don't want to see abandoned gas stations all over the place and all the things that go with that. So we want a transition that, but my question is, the business model, has the industry of your members that are putting these things in, have they got data to show that they'll be able to make a living just servicing electric vehicles in the future? Because we know it's going to cost less per hour, or, you know.
So from the car dealership's perspective, we are going to be making these, for example, a Ford dealership in Maryland has to commit $1 million.
The car dealers, yeah, but what about the gas stations? I'm sorry, you don't represent the gas stations.
Sorry about that.
I don't either, but I will tell you that there is one station in Tacoma Park, I think opened about 1.5 years ago. I don't know how this will roll out. You know, we are talking about a massive transition.
That's right.
In the way we power and run our economy, the likes of which we haven't seen since the late 1800s and early 1900s. So I think this gives them some opportunity to help bridge that gap. But yeah. I also don't think that the gasoline engine and gas stations are going away tomorrow. It'll be a period of time, probably between 10 and 25 years, and then they'll just.
Okay, I thought it would be sooner than
maybe
that. So.
Maybe a little bit sooner, but it'll be a little while before everybody gets rid of them. And I don't know whether Delegate Ruth has a little more data.
Thank you, and I agree with what Delegate Fraser Hidalgo said about the transition, but also I have spoken to the owner of the gas station in Tacoma Park that completely transitioned over to electric, and he does make money from the electric vehicle chargers, but it's not solely supporting his business. He has a service station, car servicing business that actually supports that, and I think that's going to be part of the transition, is what else can they do in addition to these chargers? Many have convenience stores, and so it's a good, people who are on a trip can stop and get a charge, go in and get fried chicken or coffee while they're waiting for their car to charge. So I think there are ways that they can supplement that. But it definitely is a transition that we're going to need to look at.
And to your point, Delegate Healy, one of the things that we have to look at carefully is the speed of the charging. Because I don't think that folks want to come around and wait for an hour or 45 minutes. And some of the new chargers that are coming out now and some of the new standards, a lot of the cars are starting to work toward 800-volt architectures, which is going to be providing 350 kilowatt-hour charging. Some of the cars already support this. So I think one of the things that we need to have a serious conversation about is what are we financing? What are we helping to encourage? And the slower chargers are great, and they sound fast. Even 50 kilowatts or 150 kilowatts sound really fast, and they are fast by today's standards or even yesterday's standards, but maybe not by tomorrow's standards.
Well, thank you. It's just something as we go forward, we have to start thinking about other ways of looking at these things, and there may be other business models that may work better. I just wondered if any research had been done on that yet, and apparently not.
Very interesting to see how that's
I'm surprised you didn't ask if there were any electric convertibles. Okay. Okay. Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello, Delegate Fraser Hidalgo.
Hello,
Thank you
Delegate
for coming
Foley.
back. It's a long time no see.
I know.
Anyway, first, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to make a comment following up on what Delegate Healy said. I think, the other thing we have to think about is how do we fund our highway trust fund? I mean, that's an issue that we have to tackle because of gasoline tax. But that's not for today. So my question is...
I do have an answer for you for that, too, for another day, just FYI. Already thought it through.
My question is, I support this bill and the amendment, and I agree with everything that you've said, and clearly we do need to put some state resources into this infrastructure. But I have one concern, and that is this rebate money, would it, for example, I have no problem giving it to local car dealers or multifamily homes or local governments or gas stations. I do kind of have a problem if we're giving rebates to, for example, Elon Musk or General Motors, because I have seen charging stations, not in Maryland, but in Pennsylvania actually, that are just, they're for Tesla only. And they're owned by Tesla for Tesla owners, which is fine. I'm just not sure that I want to give rebates to them. So what are the parameters in terms of the rebates that can be doled out under this legislation? Does it have to be a local business, or have you thought about that?
No, as long as it's a resident in Maryland or a business. But so Tesla is very unique in this, in that I have a separate bill that I'm not sure if it's coming to ECM or here, but it talks about kind of establishing a grade or a baseline for what is uptime. Tesla's infrastructure is so vastly superior to everything else out there, it is almost a joke. So those other companies that are providing public charging, I don't think they're going to be applying for this, number one. Tesla isn't going to be applying for this. So this is more geared toward residential homeowners that just bought an EV from a dealership in Maryland, hopefully, and for some of the dealerships as they're trying to upgrade as well. But I don't think that Tesla is going to be interested in, I think they really like the concept because it helps them sell cars, but they directly, I don't think, are going to benefit from this. But I could check into that for you if you like, because I think they're one of the supporters of this bill, just conceptually speaking.
Okay, thank you.
If I could add to that, Mr. Chair. Thank you. And first of all, as Delegate Fraser Hidalgo said, this is not going directly to the manufacturer. It would be going to individuals and businesses installing the chargers. And I think we need to leave it to those individuals and businesses to decide what charger is appropriate for them. And also, my understanding is that there are converters for Tesla chargers. So if you have a car that's not a Tesla car, you can still use a Tesla charger. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the Tesla piece isn't really so applicable in this, unless they buy a Tesla and they put in a Tesla charger. But there's dozens of other chargers that they could put in residentially speaking or commercially speaking.
Right, I understand and I support that, but my question was more of the chargers that are owned by Tesla that are out there.
Yeah, that doesn't have anything to do, for the most part, that doesn't really have anything to do with this bill. But, I mean, if you want to talk offline, I can talk as much as you want about it. I will tell you that Tesla is already piloting opening up their charging network in some of the Scandinavian countries, because a lot of the other third-party chargers, public chargers, we're not talking about the chargers in residence or commercial, completely different subject matter. But they have opened up some of their charging network because their chargers are vastly more dependable.
Right, no doubt. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Next question goes to
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you both for bringing this and working on this so diligently. I'm hoping that you could help me understand the discrepancy between the funding amounts that you're proposing for the gas stations in this bill and the funding amounts that Delegate Ruth is proposing in her amendment. Am I to understand that the funding amounts that are in the bill are really for slower, less expensive chargers, and hers are faster, more appropriate chargers? And does it make sense, I guess the question then, since I did understand that, thank you, is does it make sense to invest in technology in this way that might be outdated in a few years as chargers get faster and faster, instead of just putting the funding toward those that are faster now? I guess I'm just trying to understand.
So I'll speak to your first part of your question.
Thank you.
The bill is originally designed to look at level 2 charging, which is charging at home for the average sedan that's going to be between 25 and 40 miles per hour of charging. If you charge into just like a 120 outlet that's behind you, the average car is going to charge between 4 and 5 miles per hour. If you charge into something, if you plug into something like a dryer, like a clothes dryer, you're going to charge it at the average sedan, of course, is going to charge it somewhere around 30, or up to 40, depending on your amperage. But if you want to charge really fast, like the Tesla chargers that Delegate Foley was talking about, those are 350 kilowatt hour chargers. They will charge 250 miles inside of less than an hour. You could plug one of those in and have 150 miles on your Tesla in 15 or 20 minutes. 400, yeah, they're super, super fast. But to your point, that's not the original piece of the bill. As far as the amendment is concerned, I will let Delegate Ruth answer that part.
Thank you. And as Delegate Fraser Hidalgo said, that the level 2 chargers are completely inappropriate for gas stations, because you're not going to pull into a gas station and sit for 12 hours while your car charges. They need these faster chargers, and exactly what level they need we can discuss, but the costs of those are so dramatically higher, the types that they need, that, I've been talking to some of the gas station owners and fuel distributors, and, and also I spoke to the EV Institute, and they can incur costs of $100,000, $150,000 per charger. And so the current law specifies the rebate amount of 40% of the costs up to $4,000. And there is currently a special exemption for gas stations up to $5,000. That was actually in the original bill being amended out, and the reason for that is because they're not using it. Well, the reason they're not using it is $5,000 is completely insufficient to the types of installations that they need. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
Thank you. I
It's just
appreciate the
completely two different worlds as far as charging speed is concerned.
Sure. So, and I guess the overarching philosophical question here is, should we even be trying to incentivize technology that really nobody wants, or should we really be focusing on those larger chargers? And that's up for this committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
One interesting little factoid, if you could dig it up and get it to us, is when you have a gas station, what does the pump cost? I'm just curious, because that's the comparable thing. Okay, next question goes.
And you know what, Mr. Chair, I would venture to say, to extend that and say, not only the pump, but the tank underneath.
The tank underneath, right. The underground storage tank. Okay, Delegate Morgan.
And the cleaning, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to go like 30,000 square feet out of ignorance here. So my first question is universal connection. So I have a Samsung phone here, and somebody else got an Apple phone. They all got a different plug-in device. So as we watch cars, you made it clear Tesla's way above everybody else. So
In their commercial charging, not
Gotcha.
necessarily
Okay.
residential.
So are we looking towards something that would have a universal charger minus Tesla? Maybe the automobile manufacturers can come up with an answer for that one, because I just don't know.
Yeah, so there's about 3 standards that are going right now, and there's
Okay.
kind of a big fight to figure out who's going to win. For our generation, think VHS and Betamax. So that's
Someone's
really
gonna make money. I get that part.
So Tesla has their own standard, but really what this bill's mostly designed for is the homeowner that buys a Volkswagen.
Right.
ID4, or they buy a Ford Mustang, and what the charger that they're going to get is the one that has the adapter for them. If they buy a Tesla, they're going to buy one that has an adapter for them. Now, when we go to dealerships, they're probably going to buy, if it's a Ford dealer, they're probably going to buy the charging solution and install the charging solution that works on the Ford F-150 Lightning and the Ford Mach-E and whatever else Ford's coming out with. General Motors the same way.
But there are, I have an adapter for my car that allows me to use a non-Tesla charging thing. So it's really, the different standards are not as problematic as they are for your phone, ironically.
Yeah, just think about a little dongle. You just plug a little converter on the end, and it can convert it from one to the other.
Then the other question I have that follows up with this is that I keep reading or hearing about, whether it be at home or a gas station or anywhere you have these charging stations, somebody pays to put them in, then they break. Who's repairing them?
Okay, so that is a great question, and I have a bill for that. But that's a different bill, Delegate.
Okay.
And I'm happy to talk about it. But I will say, so if you were a gas station and you've invested, like this is one of the questions that I had for Delegate Ruth when we first started talking about this. I'm like, one of my concerns, which I think can be overcome, is that if we spend state dollars to help install a charging facility on a private gas station lot and it breaks, like they've got to get that back up and running because there's state dollars associated with it to some degree, which I think is a fair question. As far as privately speaking, if it breaks, well, that's on you, your residents, so you got to fix it. If it's at the dealership, they fix it. They want, everybody wants their chargers to work.
Okay, so here we go. Underneath there's a parking lot.
Downstairs.
And there's charging stations.
Yes.
If they break, who fixes them?
I would imagine in that case, depending on how old the charging station is, probably in this case, since it's the House of Delegates, they're probably calling whoever originally installed it to see if it's still under manufacturer's warranty or not.
Okay, thank you.
And if I could just add, Mr. Chair, so Delegate Fraser Hidalgo mentioned his uptime concerns, which is a separate bill, but also in the amendment, which I've submitted, there is an uptime requirement for that because we feel like if we are going to give more money to these stations, that we should require them to be up. And so if somebody goes to a station, they see it in one of these online directories, that they don't want to find out that the chargers are down. So it does require 97% uptime. And that 50% of the rebate would be released after 2 years of 97% uptime. Thank you.
And that particular piece that you're talking about, that was kind of a brainchild of this committee, standing at the Port of Baltimore with then Delegate Brooke Learman, now Comptroller Learman, as she peppered the state back and forth and had some trouble with, getting some charging for her car. So.
And last question here is to go to the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, great to see you.
It's so great to see you, my EV charging buddy.
Yes, I was going to say
EV
my
buddy.
fellow EV
Driving
adopter,
buddy.
yes.
EVs,
yes, EVs forever. I like the language in your bill about saying that the administration may offer additional benefits for the installation of EV charging equipment, multifamily housing, PUDs and condos located in environmental justice communities. I guess my question is that sort of optional or recommended to MEA? There's nothing that they would be required to do to offer those additional benefits, but that's just sort of encouragement to them to do that?
That's correct. But Mr. Vice Chair and Mr. Chair, please don't kill me. That's another bill. And
Okay,
it's part of
great.
it's part of the next bill that's coming. There we go. It's part of the next bill that I just mentioned. I put those two pieces of uptime and the utilities. It's a different bill, but they're going to be put together to address just what you asked.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Appears to be all the questions for the sponsors. We have 4 people signed up favorable with amendments: Edward Johnson, Jack White, John Fiastro, and Robert Etten. So if you're here, come on up. You're the next contestants.
You want me to stay or?
Whatever you prefer. It doesn't matter to me.
Okay, I'll just sit.
Yeah, okay.
What's that?
Okay, who'd like to go first? John?
Sure, Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
thank you. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee, John Fiastro, on behalf of NRG Energy. NRG is a integrated energy and home services company serving 6 million people across the country. It is a Fortune 200 company, has corporate carbon emission goals of reductions by 50% by 2025, 100% by 2050, and so this legislation is incredibly important, and NRG is very interested in it. Joining me today is Mr. Jack White. Mr. White is Senior Associate of National Business Development and Strategic Partnerships. Mr. White is a subject matter expert on sales channel development. He is not a registered lobbyist. He is here on my request. He has a broad understanding of what customers want and dealers need in the space, in the electric vehicle supply equipment space. NRG requests a favorable report with amendments. You'll find the amendment in the filed testimony today. The amendment allows for the assignment or transfer of the rebate to a qualified third party. So that way the customer might enjoy it at point of sale rather than down the road. I'm going to hand it off now to Mr. White, and he'll provide greater details on NRG's thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jack White, and I'm a Senior Associate of National Business Development and Strategic Partnerships, NRG. In my role, I work directly across the entirety of the electric vehicle ecosystem, engaging with manufacturers, dealers, and charging companies, both public and home, all designed to identify, mitigate, and eliminate the barriers to EV adoption. While also working to provide the knowledge, products, and tools necessary to support a sustainable electric vehicle journey and a healthy grid for consumers, we've all joined forces together to ensure that this is an achievable goal. As we work together to eliminate barriers to electric vehicle adoption, one of the projects I'm most excited about is the work we are doing aimed at accelerating electric vehicle adoption by helping customers get access to rebates at the point of sale to reduce the upfront cost of purchasing an electric vehicle. This, tied to the enrollment of a 100% renewable time of use plan, rewards customers for charging during off-peak hours when there's less stress on our grid. We support House Bill 7 because it expands the rebate program that enables consumers to overcome one of the largest financial hurdles associated with purchasing an electric vehicle and the requisite charging equipment. In addition to this, it mitigates another major barrier, range anxiety, by expanding access to faster home charging solutions for consumers. As it stands today, based on our experience working with consumers and other players in the space, we believe there's an opportunity to significantly improve the rebate program to allow more consumers to take advantage of these incentives. The process today requires them to wait weeks or even months to receive the rebate, putting a financial burden that many cannot afford. For that reason, we urge the committee to amend House Bill 7 to allow the MEA to create a mechanism for a consumer to transfer or assign the rebate to a qualified third party at point of sale of the applicable charging equipment. What we are proposing does not present an administrative burden, but instead leverages the same mechanics of the existing program and solely allows for the ability for consumers' choice to assign that rebate to a third party. Thank you, and again, we appreciate your time. That was.
I'll go, Mr. Chairman. Robert Enton on behalf of the Maryland Building Industry Association. And I'd like to point out that I am signed up favorable with amendments. And based on some of the feedback I got the other day when I testified on favorable with amendments, at this time I would like to say that's favorable with a capital F. and amendments with a lowercase a. The building industry strongly supports this legislation. I discussed it and met with the sponsor, and the only concern, I guess, that we had, and I talked to him about it, was we'd like to see it be more than $2 million. We think it's critical. You know, we've had so many bills in this committee that have mandated electric vehicles, and this is not a mandate. This is an incentive. This is to help people be able to afford it, including multifamily communities. What the sponsor explained to me, and I see it in the bill now, is that this is a base, if you will, and that it can be more than $2 million. Well, because if I have my druthers, I'd like to see the base go up, but I think this is based on his feedback from the department. So we're fine with that. If there's some way we could, you know, they can give more, wonderful, but we certainly think this is a significant step to keep pushing this, to keep increasing the base, to have a base, not a cap, and to keep increasing it. So once again, capital F, lowercase a. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Barbie and Vice Chair Stein and other delegates of the Environment and Transportation Committee. My name is Edward Johnson of the Maryland Legislative Coalition. I live in an apartment in a complex in Baltimore City. Last April, I purchased a car for the first time in 20 years. I would love to purchase an electric vehicle, but my apartments do not have charging stations. In fact, in doing a search on apartment.com, there are only around 25 apartment complexes between Harford County, Prince George's, and Montgomery counties that have EV charging stations. If we're going to make Maryland friendly to electric vehicles, this is a major component of that goal. BGE does offer 50% rebates to multiple unit dwellings, but as the Kingsgate Condominium Association of Howard County report on installing a charging station states, it costs them $17,820 to install a single charging station, and they were left with a bill of almost $9,000 after rebates from BG&E. The question is, the question on the $4,000 rebate is it per port. Most jurisdictions give higher rebates for 2 ports. The bill should also differentiate between level 2 charging stations and DC fast chargers. MDE ran out of the $1.8 million available long before the end of last year. But as mentioned before, only 25 apartment complexes in central Maryland have EV charging stations. So to whom do these Maryland rebates go to? I have spoken to several people involved in running condominiums and apartments, and they are not even aware of the rebates. We need to ensure MDA gets the word out, and I believe the amount of money for rebates should be highly increased. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question is for either Mr. White or Mr. Fiastro. I certainly appreciate the idea of incentives. I think that's great. Could you just give us a little bit more about what the customer experience looks like now at the point of sale, and maybe how we could make it better to get folks to really, take advantage of these incentives?
Sure. So typically when a customer is at the dealership, and we'll call it the point of sale, right, there is I would say not a broad understanding of the applicable rebates that apply to consumers. The cost to install the charger is one piece, and if you're talking to a dealership sales rep, that's without their I'll call their realm of expertise, right? And so when a customer purchases a vehicle, they are directed to an online website to apply for the applicable rebate for the charging equipment. And there's typically a paperwork that they submit, and then they have to wait several weeks, if not months, to receive that rebate. And so what we're proposing is that directly at the point of sale, the vision that we have is that there's a mechanism for consumers to say, hey, you know what, I want to buy this level 2 charger. I know the unit itself is, let's call it $500 to $700. There's an installation fee associated with that. What we want to do is provide that funding directly to the customer so that it helps incentivize them to actually make that purchase, because what we know and what we've heard from consumers is that when you're purchasing an electric vehicle, that added cost of, oh, wait, now I bought the car, I may have to spend $1,500, $2,000 upgrading my home infrastructure is a barrier to purchasing an EV, right? And so what we want to do is eliminate that. At the same time as reduce what we'll call range anxiety, right, by providing that faster level 2 charger. And so by mitigating and eliminating that time period that consumers have to wait, we believe that we can help to accelerate electric vehicle adoption while also promoting renewable energy plans in addition to a smart grid via time of use infrastructures.
And what is that time period, again, that they have to wait for that rebate typically now to?
Yeah, typically weeks, if not months. I'm not 100% familiar on the exact date, but it's not immediate, for example.
So the consumer, though, could be out $2,000 for a couple months potentially?
Correct.
No. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. That's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question, and this is this is going to appear to be going backward, Mr. White. But here's, my wife and I both drive electric cars. We live in an apartment building, and we actually just plug into a normal wall socket. And ironically enough, my wife drives a lot. She's a workers' comp commissioner. She hears cases all around the state of Maryland, drives 20,000 miles a year, and 90% of the time the wall socket is good enough. And now it's gotten to the point where somebody is now parking in my favorite spot, which I'm not happy about. What would it cost? I mean, I imagine that if a apartment building wanted to just put in wall sockets, normal wall sockets, what would the cost of that be? Should it be really, would it be pretty low?
I believe you're referring to level 1 charging?
Yeah, level 1, like the wall socket
Yeah.
you have back here.
Yeah, it's a relatively low cost, for the consumer for a level 1 charger, for the apartment building in this case.
Yeah.
However, it goes back to just 5 miles an hour really provided tangible benefit for someone who may or may not be traveling further than 30, 40 miles a day. That's how, we're looking at it. And so by advancing, these rebates and at this point, potentially increasing the amount of the rebate, it provides more opportunities for consumers access to those chargers.
Well, but believe it or not, for my wife, who drives a lot, 90% of the time she just plugs into a normal wall socket. I mean, it's pretty amazing, but that's often because the car is plugged in for 16 hours.
I think,
May I say something on that?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, let's go to John first and then to you, sir.
I think one thing that should be noted, though, is that the more sophisticated the charger, when you get to a different level, the better the brains are of it, frankly, right? And so when NRG is saying they can pair it with the time of use rate, what you can do is actually use it and use functionality that might be available at a level 2, where your charging doesn't kick on until after the peak load period has ended for the day. And so there are broader grid implications where you can actually benefit the grid by shifting load to off-peak times, where the customer can actually benefit in stylized rates that might be offered by a company like NRG to get like a free night and weekend rate or a heavily reduced rate. And so I think that's one of the interests that we have here, is that so rarely does a customer start thinking about their actual electricity usage when they're at the dealership and they're talking about the purchase of an EV vehicle. They are, for one of the 2 or 3 times a year, actually thinking about energy. Some of us are nerds here. We think about it all the time. Most people don't, right? And so
Guilty.
Right. Well, I'm not calling you a nerd, Mr. Chairman. I'm just saying,
I am.
Okay. But we're catching the average consumer when they're actually thinking about it, maximizing the opportunity for them to use renewable energy and time of use rates that will hopefully reduce their overall costs.
Chairman, could I be excused if no one has a question for me? I've got a bill coming up in the Senate. Thank you very much.
See, what you're suggesting would be impossible in my apartment because it's a single entrance apartment building with many people going in and out with buildings on 5 stories. So nobody can really plug into anywhere and do that, and they never know where they're going to park. So for many buildings, that's an impossible situation.
Well, that's the situation in our case. There just happen to be 10 wall outlets in the building and 9 people with electric vehicles now. Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think it's kind of important for the committee to understand the basis of time of use, because you had mentioned it, right, John? But I don't know that everybody understands what it is. So very, very quickly, for those that don't know, the problems that we have moving forward with an electrical grid is usually peaker rates or peak times. And that's usually in the summer in the afternoon between about 4 and 8 o'clock. When it's really hot, people come home from work and they put on their air conditioning. everybody puts on their air conditioning at the same time, and that is a great stress to the grid. That's where we have problems. That's where we have coal-fired power plants that have to ramp up. We want to keep those coal-fired power plants not running, or we want to decommission those coal-fired power plants. And one of the ways we do that is by managing that peak load. So what we're talking about with this particular situation is the ability to program your car so that it's not charging at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, but instead it lies dormant because it's not needed, and then at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, then is when it charges, or 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, when there's no peak load. You hear rolling blackouts in California and in other areas when there's a great load. That's what we're trying to avoid, and one of the benefits of a level 2 charger, this particular charging situation that Mr. White's talking about, is the ability to control and turn that off and on. I hope that helps. And it's not too geeky.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to ask the sponsor, because I know you've done extensive research on all of this. The one thing that I wonder about is whether this is a technology that is not going to be, it'll go away. There's something that will completely eclipse it, and we will have spent a lot of money supporting like the first go round of something when it's going to be replaced by something else. I'm reading about battery swapping business model where you lease the batteries, and you set up places all over the country where you can go in and in a short period of time swap out the battery in your car for one that's fully charged and move on. Apparently the government of China is investing heavily in this kind of thing. So I would like your answer to that because of your research.
Sure. Well, a couple of things. There is a company that's already coming to the United States. It's a Vietnamese company called VinFast, and that's what they were going to do is battery swapping and leasing. And at the last minute, they decided to not do that. They decided to change their mind and go with traditional charging. Their whole business model was based on that. It's done in Vietnam. I think they're exporting to China. China is looking at that, but there is no one magic fix here. And technologies, it's always antiquated. Like no matter what you do, as soon as you buy your iPhone, the next iPhone is coming out. So I suspect that we're going to be charging at home electric vehicles with traditional batteries or advances in batteries like solid-state batteries that will still need electricity. It'll just store the electricity differently. I suspect we are into this for at least 20 years or more. You will see cars running on traditional battery technology for many, many, many years. Eventually, it will go by way of exactly what we're seeing with the internal combustion engine, which is what happened to the horse and buggy. Like the horse and buggy got jumped over by internal combustion engines. Now internal combustion engines are getting jumped over by batteries, and then someday batteries it'll be their turn. I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't predict the future, but someday, I don't think the day is anytime soon.
It's just a question of, is this the time for us to be investing in one competing operational way of doing things?
This is the time. Absolutely. Okay. This is the time. We have to move forward with as much gumption as we can.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate that, but I still like my CDs.
You still want your convertible? Yeah, well, we'll get a metal cutter. Get you a Tesla, we'll cut the roof off.
Yeah, a Tesla with a chainsaw. There we go. Okay, that ends the public hearing on House Bill 007. So we go to House Bill 123. Delegate Frazier-Hidalgo.
Thank you. And thank you, members of the committee. This bill should be a little bit quicker. For those of you that you probably drive in HOV lanes, or you see folks driving in HOV lanes. If you are in an electric vehicle, traditionally you've been able to drive in HOV lanes on 270 and Route 50, and you're considered a high occupancy vehicle if you drive an EV. It's an opportunity, it's an incentive that doesn't really cost the state anything, but it's an incentive to get people to buy electric vehicles. As I stated in my previous bill, we are now up to like 60,000 EVs. And last year, the HOV stickers that allow people to drive in those lanes expired. Now, this committee and the General Assembly was extremely busy with Climate Solutions Now, Clean Cars Act of 2022, all kinds of things. So the HOV lane wasn't something that rose to a bill. And with that said, the HOV stickers expired last year. So what this bill does is it just reinstates HOVs for 2 years until 2025, allowing EV owners to drive in HOV lanes. It's pretty much the same thing it was before. It's just an extension for a couple of years. And in a couple of years, we look at the number of electric vehicles on the roads and we make a determination whether we've reached the point in which we no longer need to incentivize EV purchasing via this kind of an incentive. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think we're getting close. And this is just a 2-year bill. And I do have a couple of little amendments. I'm sorry. 2 of them are very technical amendments that probably aren't worth getting into that much. The third amendment I thought was very, very creative that came to us. And the amendment extends the program to allow non-Maryland EV drivers who, number one, purchase their EV in Maryland. So let's say they're a DC resident, but they purchased their EV in Maryland. Pete, where's Pete? He's left. That would be great for the dealers. And who work in Maryland can also take advantage of this. So if you're a DC resident or a Virginia resident and you buy your electric vehicle in the state of Maryland, good for Maryland, go Maryland. And you actually work. Your work is in Maryland, so you were driving in Maryland, you would also qualify. That's the big difference.
Thank you. Good to see you again, DFH. Question about the sticker. I don't have one. Do the stickers have expiration dates on it like your tags do?
Yeah, and it will be at the end of this program in 2025. It'll be
and so you have to issue new stickers then to put on the cars, right?
Right. The ones that had the previous stickers that are now expired, they'll have to get a new sticker with an expiration date.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, sir.
Hello, Delegate Love.
So I'm curious about the piece that says that the administration, on the recommendation of SHA, may limit the number of permits issued to ensure HOV lane operations are not degraded to an unacceptable level. On one hand, I can understand that because you lose the value of the HOV lane if there are too many cars there. On the other hand, I'm concerned about people who will have an electric car having wanted that added benefit is another reason why they're buying it, and now not be able to. Plus, if you're extending it to DC and Virginia residents, can you talk a little bit about that phrase there?
Sure. Well, I think it gives them the discretion. There's 2 pieces. One, it gives them the discretion to kind of cap it if it becomes too popular, which actually would be a great thing. It would mean that EV adoption is successful. I think that's important. Also, they're fairly silent on to whether to charge a fee for these stickers. Currently, they do not charge a fee, but the bill does leave it open in case there is the necessity of like a $20 or a $30 fee associated with it. So the bill is kind of open in that respect to allow for decisions to be made quickly, depending on what kind of population we have in that, like how backed up that lane is becoming. That's why we wrote the bill that way. I think that you bring up a good point, and I think it would be wonderful if we got to the point where they had to start restricting these. I do. I mean, we're at 60,000 vehicles now, just about, and it was 55,000 vehicles not too long ago. I mean, I remember when we originally came into this committee and we started working on these, right, 9 or 10 years ago. You see some of the people that have been around, and there was like, I remember 3,600 vehicles. So we're getting there, and I think it's great if we get to that point.
One follow-up, Mr. Chair. Have you gotten an estimate as to how many EVs would cause an overload on the HOV lanes? Okay.
That's a good question. I have not. But again, the way the bill's written, they can just kaput.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the $20 fee that's permitted but may not be charged. I mean, it's possible it won't be charged.
They don't currently,
They don't currently do it. It's allowable.
Yeah.
But that's only allowable on EVs?
Yeah, because it's for this bill. So I don't know if there's an HOV sticker for anything other.
That was my other question. Is there?
I don't know. I'm just kind of concentrated on this piece, but it would allow them, should they elect to charge that fee. They just, in the previous versions of the bill, they just never decided to do it.
Okay, but it's only for EVs, not
Yes,
for,
it's
okay,
prescribed in
okay,
this bill
Okay,
for
thank
EVs.
you, thank you.
There are questions, so you are free to go. Don't be a stranger.
Thank you.
Or don't be any stranger than ordinary.
Should I touch the button?
Yeah, no, don't do that. Okay, that ends the public hearing for House Bill 123. We will now go to the last bill of the afternoon, Delegate Charkoudian's House Bill 70. We do have people from other committees joining us, so please sit back here. Oh, Cornbread, how you doing, brother? Hey, it's old home. Oh, okay.
Can I bring up my panel,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Very impressed that the governor referred to you as cornbread. Okay, yeah. All right. If only I'd known that in the 1970s. Oh, well. Oh, we miss you too, brother. All right. And what's the name of our friend here who is... What's that? Edelson. Okay, very nice. Welcome to the committee. And Delegate Charkoudian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, colleagues. Good to see you again. For the record, Delegate Lori Charkoudian asking for a favorable report on House Bill 70. This bill is very similar to a bill that we passed last year that, Mr. Chair, did die in the Senate. But it is a little bit different, and I know we have new committee members, so I will walk through all of it. What I want you to think about is state highways, and of course, state highways sometimes are the big state highways that are, have, divided highways, and then other times they are the roads that are going through our communities. And so depending on what part of the state you represent, you may have more or less of the state highways going through your community, but what we do know is that far too many people die being hit by cars crossing state highways in the state. And so despite the fact that we have had this commitment to Vision Zero for a number of years now, the number of pedestrian fatalities, the number of bicycle fatalities, and the number of pedestrian and bicycle injuries on state highways continues to go up. And so what we finally come to is an understanding that we have to essentially change the rules under which the State Highway Administration is implementing the programs that they have. And so what I've done after tragically having specific areas in my community where I have lost a community member to traffic violence, walked that same strip with the State Highway Administration, lost another community in that community member in that exact same strip, walked it again with State Highway, and then lost a third community member in the exact same place. I've decided that we really need to not just do the individual advocacy that we all do on our state highways, asking for crosswalks and lights and so on, but really sort of change the rules and change the structure. And that's what this bill attempts to do. So one of the things, so it does that in a couple of ways. One of the things it does is it says the state already has context-driven guidelines. The state highways context-driven guidelines are excellent best practices of where you would put safe crosswalks, where you would put stop signs, where you would put all these things. And yet we see the State Highway Administration come in, do a road repaving, and not implement any of their own guidelines in that, and miss this opportunity to create safety there. First part of the bill requires that they do that whenever they're doing a capital project. The second thing that we see is because some roads have been designed for through traffic, whenever they analyze that road in terms of both their context-driven guidelines and traffic flow alone, they repeatedly look at the same roads, the roads where people keep getting killed, and say, there's no way that we can put in additional crosswalks here. And so we've asked them to change that analysis. At the end of the bill, you'll see this section that really asks them to change that analysis, to do a different kind of analysis that figures out how could we put crosswalks in these places that are really more consistent with what we need. There's a strip in my district, I suspect you have some too, where it is very, very dense, very traffic dependent. There's 3/4 of a mile between where you can cross safely. And I've been out there with the State Highway Administration, and they tell me what they expect people to do is to walk an extra half mile out of their way to get across the street to the bus stop. It's just not gonna happen, and so people are gonna die. And so this requires an analysis and a report on what would it cost to do that differently so we can then take that report and figure out what requirements we want to put on them. The third thing that we know is that the low pay in a lot of state highway, these jobs that do this work has led to, along with a number of other things, empty positions, and that's been another thing that's caused the delays. So there's a section in here related to that. I do want to say that it's been a pleasure to work with the new administration, having an SHA and an MDOT working with me on this bill, and so for the first time I have constructive feedback from them. You probably saw some of it. I'm working with them to incorporate a lot of those amendments, and so there will be ultimately some changes once this gets to subcommittee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to hear from Franz Schneiderman, and we're going to hear from all the advocates, and then we'll go to questions. Oh, hello, Courtney. And then we'll go to questions. So, who'd like to go first? Actually, it doesn't have to be Franz, but okay. Well, sure. Then it's Franz.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Barbe, Vice Chair Stein, members of the committee for the opportunity to address the bill. My name's Franz Schneiderman. I work with a group called Consumer Auto Maryland. It's all that works for safety, fairness, and transparency for Maryland drivers and road users. And, you know, we support this bill strongly because it really should make a difference for safety, both for the most vulnerable road users, pedestrians and cyclists, but also for everyone on our roads. You know, road safety is always a concern, but the problem has gotten a lot worse in recent years, and over the last couple decades, the trends have been in the wrong direction. You know, there was a huge spike in fatalities during the pandemic, but it's not just that. Over the last 10 years or more, fatalities among pedestrians are way up. Fatalities among cyclists are up 58% nationally between 2010 and 2021. And the important thing is it really doesn't have to be that way. You know, in other developed, wealthy countries, rates of traffic fatalities have gone way down in the last 20, 30 years, but that's not the case in this country. And the reason is, there are a number of reasons, but one of the reasons is we haven't done the kind of design changes, we haven't invested money and resources and time in that, you know, we've seen much more in other developed nations. You know, we know that about 73% of the deaths, pedestrian deaths, come on major arterial roads, that is, high-speed, high-capacity roads through urban and suburban areas. And about 67% of the pedestrian deaths come on roadways where there's no protected space for pedestrians. The great thing about this bill is that, you know, we know how to fix some of this because road engineers understand these problems and how to address them with design changes, and the bill mandates that we, SHA, act to do so, particularly in town centers and the most dangerous areas. So, you know, by protecting the most vulnerable pedestrians and cyclists, it works to protect everybody on the road. And we ask you for a favorable report.
Thank you very much. Who'd like to go next? What's your name, sir?
Do I need to press a button?
No, you're good.
No, don't press the
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Timothy Ernst. I'm here to support HB 70, the Safe Roads Act. My family lives near Georgia Avenue, Maryland Route 97. Statistically the most dangerous road in Montgomery County if you are a pedestrian. Here's a partial list of pedestrians killed just in the past few years. 49-year-old Ramon Sanchez was killed August 1, 2018 by a car while trying to cross Georgia Avenue at Veers Mill Road. 9 days later, 56-year-old Alberto Hilario was killed by an automobile while crossing Georgia Avenue near Glen Allen Avenue. 4 days after that, 41-year-old Mauricio Carrera was killed at Georgia Avenue and Reedy Drive near the Wheaton Metro Station. In April 2021, Claire Grossman was killed by a Toyota Camry while crossing Georgia Avenue near Rippling Brook Drive. Mrs. Grossman, age 65, had just gotten off a bus from work. Mrs. Grossman did not own a car. She relied on public transportation to get around. 5 years earlier, Mrs. Grossman's husband, Robert Grossman, was killed by an automobile while he was crossing Georgia Avenue.
about 1,000 feet away from the spot his wife was killed. In April 2022, 1 year ago, Eric F. Grossi died after being hit by a vehicle while crossing Tuckerman Lane in North Bethesda. Age 74, Rick Grossi was my cousin. He was a devoted husband, father, and grandfather. 3 years earlier, in 2019, a pedestrian named Jennifer DeMauro, age 31, was killed at the same intersection as my cousin in North Bethesda. I recently participated in a community walk along Georgia Avenue with my council member and Delegate Vaughn Stewart, a member of this committee.
If you could begin to wrap up your testimony,
Yes.
the committee would appreciate it.
Thank you. We watched senior citizens trying to cross 6 lanes of traffic to get to the bus stop. There was not a crosswalk or a traffic signal anywhere in sight. Many of our neighbors use public transportation. They cannot afford private vehicles. This is a safety issue and it's an equity issue.
Thank you very much.
I support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Priscilla Kania, are you with us? You are. Come right on up. You're the next contestant.
Thank you. And good afternoon, Chairman. Again, I spoke a little bit earlier on behalf of 850,000 AARP members. I'm Priscilla Kania, an AARP volunteer advocate. Just like everybody else said, this is such a big issue, especially for senior citizens. Everybody should feel safe crossing a street, but the streets can be dangerous. And as I said before, the number of pedestrians killed by vehicles has risen by 35% in the past decade, and that death rate is twice as high for people over 75 as the general population. Making streets safe has been an important issue for AARP. This issue is of critical importance to our members. When older Marylanders don't feel safe crossing the street, they are less engaged and less active. AARP has included pedestrian safety as one of the measures of our quality of life on our livability index, and we invite you to check out how well your city does. I can tell you Anne Arundel County is at a 54% out of 100. You can check this out at AARP Livability Index. You'll also be able to see how your area stacks up for housing, environment, health, convenience, and opportunity. Safe streets and roads are important to all of us. Many of us walk and we drive, but we use walkers, canes, and even push our grandkids in strollers. Drivers should share the roads and roads should be safe for all. Help us make America's streets safer for everyone. And I ask you to please give this a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 2 witnesses who wish to testify virtually. So let me call first Christy Daphnis. Christy, are you with us?
I sure am.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of HB 70. I'm Christy Daphnis from Montgomery County Families for Safe Streets. While the state is committed to Vision Zero, we haven't made significant progress in preventing deaths. There are intersections and corridors where pedestrians and cyclists are killed again and again and again, yet the infrastructure changes and meaningful safety actions are stalled or non-existent. I got involved in road safety advocacy after my child's care provider, Izu, was killed crossing Georgia Avenue in 2011, a block from where the Grossmans were killed. She was on the way home from her evening nursing class, crossing legally at an unmarked crosswalk near a bus stop, struck by a speeding driver. To cross safely, she would have needed to walk a full mile out of her way, with the nearest traffic light over a half mile away. Had there been a safe crossing closer to the bus stop, Izu may still be alive today. The 5th mile crossing distances, among other interventions offered in this bill, could have saved her life. Montgomery County Families for Safe Streets aims to support traffic violence victims and families while advocating for laws and safer infrastructure. We plan and carry out memorials for traffic crash victims across Montgomery County and have planned dozens over the past 3 years, many of which Delegate Charkoudian has attended herself. In general, the names and faces of these victims are long forgotten by lawmakers and decision makers. And we see the same situation time and time again, areas where there are no safe crossings along transit-dependent corridors dotted with bus stops, businesses, and highly dense residential areas. In some cases, we've returned to the same intersections or corridors 3, 4, 5, even 6 times as the death count rises and our neighbors are killed in the same spots along our state highways. Passage and implementation of this bill would lead to a more fulsome analysis and implementation of the state-issued context-driven design guide, as well as a thoughtful process for installing safe crossings. Passage of this bill would prompt action versus empty words and platitudes of Vision Zero. If passed and implemented, this bill will certainly save lives. I urge you to report favorably in support of HB 70. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. And the final witness, Lee Walton. Ms. Up, and there she is. Welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair and Vice Chair and committee members. My name is Leah Walton, and I am a safety advocate for the National Transportation Safety Board. The NTSB is an independent federal agency charged by Congress to investigate all civil aviation accidents, as well as other major transportation disasters in other modes, to determine the probable cause and issue safety recommendations to prevent future tragedies from occurring. In 2018, the NTSB released a special investigation report looking at pedestrian safety. In this report, we issued safety recommendations that dealt with vehicle-based safety countermeasures, infrastructure planning, and improved pedestrian safety data. One of the, one of the safety recommendations pertaining to infrastructure planning is to the Federal Highway Administration, which reads, expand support of state and local safety projects beyond focus cities to promote municipal pedestrian safety action plans that develop a network of safety improvements. While this recommendation was issued to the Federal Highway Administration, our safety recommendations can be adopted or used as a best practice to improve safety by a state on its own. Protect vulnerable road users through a safe system approach is on the NTSB's most wanted list of transportation safety improvements. A safe system addresses all aspects of traffic safety: road users, vehicles, speeds, infrastructure, and post-crash care. States must make better safety investments, from pedestrian safety action plans and road treatments to strong traffic safety laws and robust education efforts to mitigate injury risks for all road users. The Safe Roads Act of 2023 will help Maryland create a safe system for all road users. Thank you for allowing me to share the NTSB perspective.
Thank you very much. And we have a couple of questions. Let's go to them. First question goes to Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Charkoudian, for this bill. I like it. The question that I have is, and Mr. Schneiderman kind of hit on it in his testimony. When plans, construction plans are designed for highway construction, et cetera, they have to meet the design criteria for the jurisdiction. When an engineering firm designs a state highway or a plan for a state highway or Anne Arundel County or Prince George's County, they have to be designed per the standards of that criteria, like SHA has their own criteria. If an engineering firm submits a set of plans that don't meet the criteria, they're sent back to the engineering firm and denied permit. So the question is, and I see NTSB is in favor of the bill as well, and that's great. I think your bill might help current roadway systems, but no future roadway systems, in my opinion, is going to be addressed like this bill does for current roadway systems unless the design standards are changed. So have you contacted, State Highway or at NTSB or the Professional Engineer Society or someone to help revise the design standards? Because if you don't do that, everything must be constructed the same way it is now.
Thank you for that question. So I think it's my understanding that there's a couple of different sets of standards that are out there. So I want to make sure I understand. And when you're asking about design standards promulgated by what agency or organization?
Sure, I'll be more specific, like my grandfather says. I'll be more specific with my specificity. State Highway has their own design standards, where signs can be placed, the width of the highway, the width of the shoulders, the depth of the asphalt, the substrate, et cetera. If you want to have these crosswalks or crossings across those state highways, that has to be part of the design standard by state highway. And if you don't have the design standards revised, nothing's going to change in the future because the plans that the engineers prepare will be rejected.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this answers your question, but let me try this and see if this is helpful. So the irony of this bill is what I'm actually doing. So the State Highway Administration established its own context-driven design standards. So you can go to the State Highways website, context-driven design standards, and those standards define things like in a, I'm trying to just make sure I get their names, suburban activity center. So that would be a certain level of pedestrian activity, a certain level of retail shops, a certain level of density. They have something called a traditional town center, right? So they've got 5 different contexts, and their standards say, in this context, here's the best practices. Here's what your crosswalk should look like. Here's how, here's what your, so it defines a lot of these things. Here's what your lane width ought to be. While it's not perfect, if we were actually implementing those standards, we would all be a lot safer. But what I have found over the last 4 years, since I've been actively involved in looking at their standards and looking at the roads in my district where people are getting killed, is that those standards are not implemented.
Okay.
And so what this is literally saying is implement your own standards. Implement them here in this way. Every time you're doing a capital project, implement your standards, and then take a look at the places you don't currently have projects and give us a report on what would it take to implement the pedestrian safety of your standards in these roadways, so that we can look at it and say, okay, that's going to be 10 million, that's going to be 20 million, that's going to be 5 million, like that's a priority, let's make it happen. Or no, we could keep waiting. You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't know that part of it yet because they have the standards and they repeatedly do work and don't implement them. So
And that is a problem then.
yes.
Let me just add, the first paragraph of the bill, if you review it, says that the state's going to, in any construction, post-construction preservation or maintenance project, should be implementing these context-driven design changes. So that would involve, revising some existing roads and existing projects to make them better meet the kind of standards the delegate referring to.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for that question, Delegate Holmes, and thank you, Delegate Charkoudian, for explaining. I wanted to know, because I don't know what the design standards are. Do design standards include signage in different languages, if applicable for that area?
That is a really good question, and I actually don't know the answer to that. So, I mean, we could, I'll be looking it up. I'll send it to you when I see it. If you Google State Highway Administration context-driven guidelines, like it's, but, they should if they don't.
Yeah, so it was just a question going
Yeah,
off of the
thank you.
Delegate Holmes. I had another one. I mean, I had that same one anyway, but I just wonder, because, there could be also language barriers, just like there are disabilities, regards to signages and wayfinding. So thank you
Yeah,
so much.
Agreed.
I can die now. You didn't know an answer. Next question goes to Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I guess there's a first for everything now, isn't there? I really appreciated Delegate Holmes's question, and I just want to confirm my understanding. The bill is tying the requirement to the standards, so if they revise the standards in the future, then they're going to have to abide by those updated standards, correct?
Yes, yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Further questions? Apparently not. You're free to go. Thank you very much. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 70. It ends, I believe, it ends the public hearings for, thank you to our friends from Appropriations, and it ends the public hearings for today. Announcements. What?
Depends on the day of the week.
Yeah, of course it does. That's right. Well, we may have fish tacos.
Oh, well, please forgive me of that information.
Yeah. Maybe, who knows? Okay, any announcements from subcommittee chairs? Any announcements from anybody else? Okay, in that case, you're all free to go and we're adjourned.